hours, a bit much.
Not happening. Right, okay. Hello, Internet.
Hello.
Yeah, this is the first ever live stream. It's going to be about RPG pet hates, because we've all got very strong opinions about role-playing, basically. So we've got an interesting panel here of people I've never met in my life and people I have. So without further ado, I'll just click on people and they can introduce themselves. First of all, if you haven't met me, I'm Emma. I run Dungeons and Drinking, which is a kind of geeky YouTube channel, and also focused on homebrewing, which, as I'm drinking my own homebrewed raspberry beer, you know, it kind of works out really well. And I've sort of been on and off playing role-playing games for about 7-8 years now. So, Amy.
Hi, my name's Amy. I first of all run reviews for several computer games and RPG games, Rainbow Reviews, and a modelist, but mostly I've been on and off RPGer for the past 10 or so years, live action and tabletop.
Cool. Okay, Alex.
Let's see, my name is Alex. I'll go by Captain Gothnog on YouTube, and I publish D&D related material on Drive-Thru RPG. And I've been playing tabletop role-playing games for about 35 years.
Wow.
And still playing.
Right. Oh, good. Darren.
Hello, I'm Daz. I run a games night in Newcastle called Talking Swords. I've been playing tabletop war games since I was 18, and I've been GMing and playing RPGs since I was about 21.
Sean, if he's still here.
I'm here. My camera apparently isn't, but I certainly am. Yeah, I'm Sean. I've been, unlike all these professional folk who came before me that are doing something with their hobby, I'm just an enthusiastic amateur. I have been gaming for about 30 years now, tabletop. I've done wargaming, role-playing. I've started doing LARP about 6-7 years ago and really enjoying it. I'm the perennial DM of my group. I'm always the games master. And God, I'm bored.
Jenny.
Next.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm Jenny, also known as the Rogue DM on YouTube, or the Rouge DM, depending on how you spell it. I'm probably the youngest member in terms of playing games. I've been playing tabletop RPGs for about 5-6 years now, and I've been DMing for about 2 years, but I've learned a hell of a lot in the past few years, and especially with this amazing community of people, and I'd rather have a nice new YouTube channel up and running as well, so it's all good.
Mr. Large.
Thank you very much. My name is John Large. As you can no doubt see from the graphic down there, I'm from the Red Dice Diaries. I've been role-playing tabletop-wise for longer than I care to remember, although not quite as long as Alex. And I've been LARPing for a good few years besides. I know some of the people in this hangout, such as Emma from Live Action, which I very enjoy. That's a more sort of casual social activity for me. And the tabletop, I know a few of these people from YouTube, such as I'm a big fan of Alex's channel, and Jenny plays in one of my games online. And tabletop is where I go to do my slightly more serious role-playing, whereas LARP is where I go to be a bit more social. And I'm looking forward very much to this hangout and talking about things that wind me up.
Cool, thanks guys. So the general basic hangout layout I've decided is going to be split up into sort of 3 kind of areas. So first of all, pet peeves you have as a player, pet peeves you have as a GM, DM, or whatever you want to call it. And then if there's any questions that people send in, there's a couple that already sent in, we can kind of discuss those as well. So first of all, John, biggest pet peeve that you have as a player?
Well, I don't know if it's my biggest pet peeve as being a player, but I suppose my biggest pet peeve related to playing will be the fact that, as one of the other guests has said, I don't actually get to play in an awful lot of games. I'm another one of these people who's sort of perennially the GM when it comes to gaming. I mean, ever since I first started, where I was the person who had the rule book, so I was the GM, and I've pretty much stuck with that ever since. I suppose my problem would be that I don't actually get to play an awful lot. I mean, I do more so now that I'm role-playing more online, but obviously you still have limitations on your time. So I think that would be my main issue related to playing, the lack of it I get to do.
How about you, Jenny? Oh,
Sorry.
Okay. Did you want me to say my biggest one actually whilst you're finishing?
Sure, yeah.
I would say the one which is fairly obvious for a lot of people, which is power gamers. And I know me and John had quite an interesting conversation about this when I released videos about metagaming and power gaming as my biggest pet peeves, because I may have kind of misunderstood at the time kind of the definition of them. I wouldn't say it would be in terms of the actual game, but the actual players I'm playing with. I absolutely cannot stand people who play merely to win. Obviously, in a game, your characters are aiming to do so. But one of the things that really, I mean, as I've gained more experience, because I used to be quite a big quester in terms of games. I originally started out with computer game RPG, so I was always, complete a quest, get the gold, get all the money and the items and whatnot. But more and more, I'm really getting annoyed by a lot of people, far more people than I actually thought would have actually been power gamers than I actually originally envisioned. But the idea that people are just actually willing to kind of sacrifice the story and the possibility of furthering people's plot as a group to just basically claim all the glory as a player rather than a character. I don't know if that actually made any sense whatsoever.
I think it's more down to it's a problem of definition, really, isn't it? I mean, that's always a problem, certainly online whenever we have discussions about stuff like this. What one person thinks of as like a power gamer may not be the same thing that another person thinks of. I mean, I certainly know, for instance, when I tend to make a player character, if I go, just to use a random example, if I say, right, yeah, I'm going to make a wizard in a fantasy game, then, yeah, you best believe that I'm going to put all the necessary stats that I can into making sure I can cast some spells with a reasonable degree of success. Yeah. Because as far as I'm concerned, that's a wizard. That's how I go. Some people might say that's a bit min-maxy, but certainly my definition of it doesn't really include that. Because as far as I'm concerned, if someone else played a thief or something, I'd expect them to be able to commit a theft.
Well, would you accept possibly, John, that this situation here, if you make a character whose sole ability is based around in skills and strengths are based around what's good for his career, and has nothing else beyond that, that's actually min-maxing, where somebody that goes, I'm a good wizard, but I've also got these other interests as well, I've got some other branching out ideas. If all your character's about is getting off the best result for your character, that's unrealistic, if nothing else.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if you only have a very one-dimensional character, then putting all thoughts of like min-maxing or power gaming aside, then that's just not going to result in a very satisfactory playing experience, probably either for you or for anyone else in your group. I mean, if you put aside the sort of momentary satisfaction of going, oh yeah, I cast that really amazing spell, but yeah, that's for like one combat round or whatever, and then if you've got like you rightly say, if you've got nothing else to go with, you've not got a more developed sort of rounded character, then what do you do after you've cast that spell?
Yeah.
So I agree. Yeah.
I think for me the difference between a power gamer and what I'd call an optimizer, someone who's trying to make the optimal character, is one is done kind of in character and one is done out of character outside the game. It's like you said, to win the game. That's what to me the classic power game is trying to do. Because I've seen there are people who do kind of optimize themselves. Maybe it's a genius physicist just terrible at everything else. he's terrible with personal relations. He's terrible with, balancing his checkbook. But man, he can figure out the secret universe in his head. So I mean, if you made a character like that, that would be okay with me, as long as it was a character rather than I gotta win this game, so I'm gonna make the guy who can do the most damage, or beat everyone else at doing this. That sort of thing.
I mean, I think it's always like funny how when people mention min-maxers, they tend to focus on people who go for the sort of the max end of the scale. People who put the high stats in certain things and concentrate in a certain area. But I certainly know for myself. I mean, I can have just as much role play, fun, and entertainment if I've got a character with like a really low stat. Like, to use the stereotypical example, if you've got the barbarian who's got like the strength to topple words, but he can barely string like 2 syllables words together. You can get, if you play that right, you can get just as much entertainment out of having that low stat as you can out of having that massive stat. But for some reason, people sort of playing up minimum stats or playing down minimum stats, however you want to say it doesn't really seem to be seen as much of a problem. I don't know why that is.
Well, it's actually a very valid point you're making there, John. One of the things I would say is I would define a power gamer as somebody who's getting the maximum they can, but then minimises all their penalties. I mentioned this when Emma first posted our Pet Hates video. I had a situation I was playing for one blessed moment I was playing, and we had a power gamer. Now I would define the power gamer as, a great example of this was he took a floor, we were playing Serenity, and he took full mouth. This guy was like Jane. He would curse, swear, wouldn't think anything of it, meant nothing to him. Except we were in certain situations when this would be an issue, so he said, well, I won't talk. If I talk, I have to be full mouth, but if I don't talk, I won't cause any offence. I went, nah, that's power gaming. That there is power gaming.
Yeah, that's. I'd say that's a fair.
I think it's borderline cheating as well. So.
Yeah, definitely borderline cheating.
So yeah, I mean that for me, I know that John and Amy certainly will know from LARP was an example, but I found a situation where I was in where I was offered a wish, so basically anything my character could want, and they offered me what Amy actually wants for her character was an Ancestral Centurion, which is pretty damn snacky, I think, and I'd been struggling for about 6 months in LARP to actually get the Paladin skill. And I turned down Ancestral for Paladin because, frankly, it fits the story more. I don't know. I don't understand the concept of just wanting to get the shiny thing for no reason at all. I don't know if that's a power of a gamey kind of trait or what really.
Hey, you did better than me. I died shortly before I was going to get my Paladin.
Yeah, you did, didn't you?
And to be honest, I see that one as you're going for the role play over the big Jackie thing, and the character's decision to go for what's right for them instead of all about the power. So it was choosing.
I think it comes down to I think it's a bit more simple than that. I mean, it comes down to, as Alex was saying, are you making that decision as your character, so sort of IC, or are you making it sort of OOC, out of character? As the player saying, well, if I look at it from an out of character perspective, if I take A, B, and C, that's going to result in me being like the ultimate divine paladin wielder of doom. Or
I've already got that title.
Yeah, all right, stop bragging.
You're Doom.
And or is it a case of you're looking at it in character as you did with your sort of LARP character, Emma, where you went, oh, I've been working towards getting something. So that's what I want to go and get. I'm only going to take that first step on the ladder rather than trying to shortcut my way to the top.
To be fair, I kind of shortcutted my way to the second tier, which was nice. But yeah, they offered me it. So anyway, so yeah, I think that sort of covers power gaming. So I think Jenny's finished eating now, so we'll move over to her.
Yeah, I haven't really had much experience with power gaming before, so I wouldn't really be able to add much to that anyway. But I think my biggest problem at the moment is because I've become somebody who's very much one of the role players of a group of people. So I'm very much the actor, I suppose you could put it. The thing I don't like is and I suppose power gaming could come into this, I don't like it when people can't really get into a session because either there are things going on all the time in the background, or they're thinking so much about stats that they just want to, again, min-max with them, or they can't seem to just get into a mindset where they can just play. They always have to think about other things at the same time. I don't know if any of you come across that.
Yes.
I sort of have it in quite similar circumstances. We're playing a game at the moment, which is sort of a fortnightly even game where it's loosely based off the culture novels, and Sean will know at least one of the players who plays. Yeah. And one of the things that I really find it hard to get into is, even though I'm quite a big sci-fi geek, there is a lot of techie kind of speak in it, and especially if I'm coming there from work, I'm absolutely knackered, and my brain just shuts off and like tech, and I'm playing a social character first time in ever, so it's actually getting to social mindset of realizing, shit, there isn't actually a social element to it. I mean, it's gotten better because there's a lot more social aspects to it now, because you can't really solve things just by going to engineering, which is great. But also I found that there are some games that have been so number crunchy that I just can't actually get into the story at all. So from that aspect, it's really difficult to kind of get into like a kind of mindset for it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been involved in various storytelling style games. For example, I played in this Lord of the Rings campaign for the One Ring, and that was very much a storyteller thing. But then I played another game of the same system at the UK Games Expo, and that was very number crunchy. And it didn't help that the games master had like so many added bits of paper, and in fact at one point he actually lost something, so he was rummaging in his bag for about 5 minutes. But yeah, I couldn't get into that either, just because he presented it in such a different way. Instead of focusing on the story and other things, he said, right, you need to get this role, and I'm going to talk about this now.
Was it a particular system that we might have heard of, or is it just a random one? Oh, someone's joined.
The One Ring. I don't know.
Oh, the crunchy one.
Yeah, well, you can play it number crunching, or you can play it very storytellery. I personally prefer it in the storytellers.
Oh, right, yeah. Because we have we used to know someone who created a game called Soul's Calling, which was so number crunchy. They had tables for everything, and you had to have different dice rolls, every single thing, and it was just insane. I see Drew has joined us as well. Hello, Drew.
I have. I was letting you finish your point about number crunchy stuff.
Yeah, we don't talk about number crunchy here. This is Drew. He can introduce himself briefly.
Hi, I'm Drew.
Yeah, what do you do, Drew?
Hi, Drew.
I play various board games, and I have in my time played a few role-playing games, and I play video games, and I'm a gamer of all sorts.
Yeah. So
That's the best way of introducing myself.
Yeah, I mean, you introduced me to Age of Empire, so that's something that you are very good with. So yeah, just to recap, we are talking about pet peeves of tabletop RPGs as a player. I'm going to move on to Sean, because he's next in my list.
Oh, we've got a list. Oh dear.
Yeah. It's kind of on my screen, so I'm just going from right to left.
Cool. Well, I'll go for one of my pet hates as a GM. Seeing as my experience goes, I cannot stand the players that derail the plot. The ones that go off with their wee crazy ideas. They're not in a scene at the moment, so they pair off. Any GM here will know this. You're having a scene. There's a few players involved in it. Some of them are not there, and then two of them start talking, and then they start plotting. And the next thing you know, and I've seen this happen, we had two players spend 2 fucking hours trying to build a still.
Oh dear.
I was ready to cry. After being the GM, I would have. It's one of the things that it can derail the game so badly and cause so much overrun in your timetable. It's incredible.
Thing is, just to use your example of the 2 hours building a still, if it had been determined, I obviously don't know the details. If it had been determined that building a still takes 2 hours, as a GM, I've just said 2 hours pass. You have built a still. Congratulations. Moving on.
Oh no, we were in space at this point in time, and they're trying to figure out what they could cannibalise, and going through it all, and they're pointing the fact that we're having our role-playing experience. You can't step on our role-playing experience. And we're going, no, we're trying to get the story, and you keep tearing folk in to this big discussion and derailing any progress we're making. And it was nothing to do with it. This is just a wee thing that GM had hatched up, and these guys spent the next 2 hours derailing any progress so they could get this done.
Yeah, I mean, I could see how that could be frustrating. I think I'd probably have had a word with them.
Yep.
So this is me being very diplomatic. I'd have probably had a word with them, and then if they'd have still been dead set on, well, our role-play experiences, we want to sit around effectively sort of mulling over a technical shopping list for 2 hours or whatever, I'd have said, perhaps you're not an ideal fit for my game.
I'd agree with you entirely. Again, this was one of the people involved in this was actually the same guy that did the "I'm not talking" in this situation. So, but I wasn't the GM. Normally, I am quite sharp to bring that sort of stuff down if it's interrupting the flow of the progress of the story. I'm very much story-driven as GM, and I like to tell the story and bring folk and get folk involved. And this kind of derailing can really destroy the feel that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I can sort of see the point there, and I suppose obviously every sort of situation is entirely different, but it's a difficult one. I certainly know in the past when I've been doing face-to-face games that I've put up with players whom I may not have done before because they're the only people I had available. Obviously, that's not an ideal situation, but there you have it. I mean, it's one of the benefits I've been sort of quite vocal about in getting involved with gaming online is the fact I've now got a bigger pool of players, so you can afford to be a bit more selective about what players you have in your game. Because obviously, there may be some players out there who are brilliant, but their particular style of play doesn't suit my GMing style. I mean, I'm not a very, as Emma was saying, I'm not a very sort of technically minded GM. If I run a sort of science fiction game, even if it's a hard science fiction game, there's going to be a limit to how technical I can get just because I don't have that knowledge.
Yeah.
But so it's with someone's like, oh, I really want to get into the nitty gritty of how everything works and the sort of the equations and the formula and all this sort of stuff. I'll be like, to be honest, I'm probably not the GM you're looking for. I'm more sort of Star Wars than some giant encyclopedia-sized traveller supplement.
These are not the GMs you're looking for.
The duties of the GM is to make sure that your players will fit with the group and the story that you're trying to do, because it's hard to do, especially when you, as you're saying, John, you've not got such a big pool of players to pick from. You're going, oh, I'll bring this guy in and see how he does. Oh God, no, that was a disaster. Don't invite him back.
Yeah, the way I've always done it myself is when I bring new people into an existing group is I've always said to them from the start, well, I'm going to bring you in for 3 sessions, and after those 3 sessions, I'm going to go to the rest of the group, and I'm going to say to them, do you think this person fits in with the group? If more of them turn around and say no, he doesn't, then I'll say, look, no hard feelings, but the group feels that you're not working with the group, and that's done. Whereas obviously if they say, yeah, he's great, yeah, keep him in the group, then I'll, or even if it's sort of half and half, I'll say, well, there's potentially some sort of differences, but that can be worked on. Whereas if everyone's unanimously like, oh no, that's not working, then I'd suggest it's probably better you find out after sort of 2 or 3 sessions and part ways reasonably amicably than sort of let it drag on until later in the day and then try and sort of extricate the person from the group.
Yeah, it is one of those things I think a lot of players don't consider about a GM's work is having to do it's personality management, it's people management so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of things that the GM sort of traditionally that the GM sort of takes on their shoulders that can actually be handed off to players and get the players involved. I mean, I talk a lot about it myself in the videos I do, where I talk about like setting creation and stuff like that. There's a lot of elements where if a player goes, oh, I'm playing some sort of naval pilot or whatever, you can say, oh, well, okay, so what's the Navy like in this fantasy world? You can get their ideas, and it gets them involved because they think, oh, well, great, the GM's listening to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it also takes a lot of that weight off your shoulders and makes it a bit easier for yourself as a GM.
I mean, I don't know if you've seen the new the Dresden role-playing game, which I've seen, which was heavily involved in the players and creating the whole setting, which was fantastic. Very different. It was actually surprisingly difficult as a GM to let go enough to let them have so much leeway in what's going on.
Well, I admit I have heard a bit about the Fate system, but...
Ha ha ha.
There's an inside joke I'm not getting here.
It's basically
Fucking obsessed with it is a way to put it.
He's the poster child for Fate.
Yeah.
I don't keep the system. I love Dresden. I love the books, so the system's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
A few of the people on here have to put up with me gibbering on about Fate all the time. That's all right.
Yeah, no, I've had to watch a few videos about Fate.
I'm in a Fate game now.
Oh no.
Who's running it as well?
Congratulations.
Oh.
That's
Okay,
it, into it.
so Darren, what's your you've done quite a few bits of GMing as well, haven't you? So in terms of player or GM, because I think we're kind of ignoring the whole rules here. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Sorry.
Define rules.
Well,
Where we going? We don't need no rules.
I tend to GM more than I play. I to be honest, everyone seems to wish they could play more. I prefer GMing. I like kind of being in control of what's going on. I feel like I've got more control over the story. But as my player pet peeve is kind of if someone writes a campaign that reads like Zelda, where you walk into a dungeon and you fight something and then find a hidden switch and move into the next room and fight another thing, and that really, because I've probably spent like hours creating a character and I can't develop my character in your story if your stories are trekking through rooms and stabbing things. So that kind of irritates me as a player. And the thing was mentioned before about the derailing of games as well. That can be pretty catastrophic to a game. We on Rogue Trader once we spent an entire game session on a planet because one of the characters decided he wanted to get married.
Oh God!
To an NPC, and then you had to plan the wedding, and someone had to go and find flowers and get a priest and stuff, and
Why?
and
Isn't Second Life
lost. But at the same time, I think a bit of freedom can be good as well, because players can go off down an alleyway that the GM didn't think was there and find something the GM wasn't expecting that adds to the story. But from a GM perspective, I suppose the thing that grinds me is when someone has a set thing they do. I've got a specific thing in mind. I've got a guy in my Dark Heresy campaign who has a grapnel, and at the first sign of trouble, fires it at the ceiling and flies away. And no matter what goes on, that's his answer to everything. He's out of the window. He's up a tree. He's running away with his grapnel, and then as a GM, you have to try and write something where there's nothing he can grapnel onto. And if you're writing so that a player can't mess up your game, then you're not concentrating on writing a good campaign for the other players. So that kind of thing is a pretty big pet hate for me as a GM.
I'm curious, most Dark Heresy campaigns, if somebody kept running away, they'd be shot for cowardice. It's the Imperium of Man.
Yeah.
Coward!
You appear to have failed this mission that the Lord Inquisitor sent you on. What's that? You're on fire? How did that happen?
Pretty much.
I've tried that a few times. Sometimes it stops him running away, but sometimes he says he was going for backup.
Since when's the facts ever stopped the Imperium of Man?
Since when did they call for backup? It's called a rifle large gun. You've got bolters.
Your backup's exterminatus.
So yeah, I'm having too much beer here right now.
I don't think I'm having
I don't know
enough.
if that's possible. But, so, Alex, how about you? Your pet peeves?
Okay. Well, I guess my biggest pet peeve as a player or a GM is just kind of player apathy. Having people show up at a game and just not seem like they actually want to be there. It didn't seem to happen as much in the old days because you had to really work to get to a game. But nowadays it seems like even in person, someone will show up and they'll have their smartphone and they'll be texting while the game is going on, and then say, okay, what do you do? Hello? Oh, it's my turn. Okay, what's going on? Really? You can't just.
What would you say? Because I have to admit, at times I have been guilty of this, and I totally hold my hands up about this. But what do you think about the concept of people being engaged in the game, but doing things such as knitting? Because I know Becca, who does Making Art of the channel, and a lot of us who do role-playing games as a group, we tend to do quite a lot of things with our hands. For example, I make bookmarks whilst I'm gaming, because a lot of the time we don't actually have to do a lot of dice rolls, but in terms of role-play, we're still really engaged in that.
I guess it would depend on the individual. Some people can do that. Some people, especially something that doesn't take like a lot of mental concentration, like doing that. It's just a repetitive action that you can kind of do on remote control.
Yeah.
And still pay attention. And that's very different. I even know people who kind of like to sketch a little bit while it's going on, but they're still paying attention. And I don't quite mind that as much, although. As a GM, it can be a little distracting because sometimes it's hard to tell if they're listening or not. If someone's not looking at you and they're just doing their own thing, it can be a little disheartening as a GM. And there's nothing that'll make a game bad for me as a GM or a player, is if the other players just aren't involved. Because you as a player be like, okay guys, the GM will say, okay, what are you guys doing? And you look around because you don't want to hog the spotlight, but then you have to say, okay, well, I guess we go into this. We head down that corridor, and then you kind of looking around there, and everyone's just sitting there, and the GM has to prompt them. It's like, so what are you doing? Oh, I follow. Good for you.
Yeah,
you're officially a drone. And yeah, that's to me that's the worst. It just. I would take the worst power gamer or over that, because the power gamer is at least they care enough to want to ruin the game. To me the apathetic player is just so much worse for me. So that's the big one.
I know I've had games fairly recently, and I'm not going to name names because they might actually watch this, but they have occasionally run off to do other things and then come back in and completely miss the plot because they have been totally not listening or out of the actual room.
Yeah.
For me, for someone who is actually actively trying to get out of the habit of, as Alex said, being apathetic, as it were, it's infuriating because it's disrespectful to GM for one thing, because you are putting a lot of effort and time into preparing a game, especially the game that we're doing at the minute, which, given the detail of the world that has been created, it's just, I can imagine having GM'd myself in the past, seeing how much time it's gone into it. It's just, it really pisses me off personally.
It is interesting. I've had an experience similar to this. Not somebody you mentioned earlier, about knitting.
Yeah.
I think visually, it's something a GM will notice. Is you're trained to know when your players are focused on what's going on and when they're not being focused. Catch folk out. And I had an example with one guy. It was a kind of Dark Heresy game I was doing, where we had one person playing a detective type sort of Imperial Guards, not guardsmen, custodies, from a Victorian era type world. He's very much based on Dr. Watson, and he constantly was writing his notebook. Now his idea was what he was going to do was translate this and sort of type it up like sort of Sherlock Holmes novels. But this meant he was constantly writing. Anything was going on, his nose was down, and he was scribbling away, scribbling away, scribbling away. No attention being given to what's going on around, and having to be prompted to speak before he went back to writing stuff down. It was very, very disconcerting as a GM. He wasn't uninvolved in the game, but he was uninvolved in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one thing a lot of people I think miss is the idea that players and the GM are both required, and that you can have the greatest GM in the world, but if you got players who just aren't involved, it's not gonna you're not gonna have a fun game. It's just not the GM. You're not gonna be able to GM as well because the fun is just sucked out for you. You're just not gonna put as much enthusiasm into it. You're not gonna put as much is life into it, and the other way around. I've had a GM who was just just didn't seem to want to be doing it. It was odd because usually GMs are more enthusiastic because they did put a lot of work into it, but it didn't seem like he kind of wanted to be there. It's like so I'm not sure why he was there. So and it just didn't make me want to play. It didn't make me want to put in 100%. So even if I come into a game and as a player, I'm gonna and even if the GM is boring at first, maybe he's new or something like that, I'll still try and focus on what he's saying as much as I can, even if part of my brain doesn't want to, because I know that that's going to help him to become better. He'll feed off that as well, and it'll kind of help us along.
So, Drew, what's your biggest hate as a player?
I was just gonna sort of quickly tag on with the whole like knitting at the table thing.
Yeah.
Like I know you do that when we play board games.
Yeah.
I was gonna say like I've got a massive pet hate of people. Like there are particular people that you'll know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
There are particular people who like you're trying to explain the rules to a new game to people and they won't be listening, and then or it will get to their turn and you have to prod them like a couple of times. And like I know when you guys do it that you're listening. So like as you say, like if they're able to listen and do the thing that they're doing at the same time, that's all well and good. Anyway, on to so role playing game pet peeves. I mean for me, I think overcomplicated rule system as a player will annoy me.
Oh yes.
I know the unnecessarily so ones. I remember a while ago that we tried playing Shadowrun, and I know they've improved the system a lot since supposedly, but we found out about it. We really liked the idea of it. We got the book and we sat down to play it. We all made our characters and we got into combat quite early on in the game because of the setup for the mission. And it was like, right, I want to punch that guy in the face, and they were like, right, here's 20 d6. Roll them all, and then you sit there and you look at it and you're like, I don't know what this means at all. Did I do it? And then like, it was just like, and then when you just come off playing something like D&D where you know exactly what to do, it's like quite easy and quite well explained. So yeah, I think sort of like overly complicated rule systems is my pet peeve as a player. As a GM, I don't really tend to do a lot of GMing in role-playing games. It's only when I find like that rare role-playing game that I really do want, like when we did Edge of Empire.
Yeah.
And I say my biggest pet peeve is when it's impossible to write for the players because they're much cleverer than you.
Is this because you figured out that your adventure basically was the train run from Firefly?
Well, no, it wasn't that. No, it wasn't use that. It's stuff like I've tried running a couple of games before, and I go like, right, I think we're going to do this, and I think they're going to go from A to B, like quite simply from this, and you lay it out for them to go from A to B, and then they end up going from A to C all the way to D, maybe back to B. And you're having to sit there and kind of like come up with it on the go, and you kind of think like, why did I bother spending 3 hours lining this all up, and then ignored all of it?
To be fair, to go back to your earlier point about complicated rules, I think like whenever a GM sort of sits down in front of you and says, right, this is a game we're going to be playing, and they put the book down on the table, as a player, you should be able to pick that book up, slap them around the face with it. and if they say ow, that means the book is too thick and the rules are too complicated. Obviously, that only works with softcover versions. I'm not.
I was going to say, what about hardcover versions?
Yeah.
Just 14 new 5th edition. That looks like it'll hurt. But no, I just think like sometimes when you'll come across like a role playing game and they have a really nice way of doing it, and then you'll find others which are just like roll all these millions of dice and find out what happens.
Oh,
And your character's only
yes.
trying to make a cup of tea.
The best one I know of that is the DBZ roleplay system. You need 150 dice. What?
Why?
You wrote this game. What?
That'd be the point where I'd go, no, what I need to do is put this book back on the game store and help them walk.
The worst thing is, it doesn't pass to John's theory of slapping the GM with it because it's the thinnest book I've ever seen for a roleplay.
Depends how hard you're slapping him. There is a sorry, go ahead.
I think I was quite lucky then because I started out with RPGs, basically playing Mind's Eye Theatre version of Requiem, the vampire game, and the World of Darkness books are essentially either roll a d10 and do the successes, or draw from a like cards from ace to 10, so which is the easiest thing ever, and then just calculate using the dots on the sheet, which was a surprisingly simple one, and then you go up to something like Soul's Calling, which I play tested and never want to play again. So, you know, I think I kind of lucked out here.
Am I guessing you didn't give it some positive feedback then?
It was a really nice world setting. It's just the rules were just unbelievably far too complicated.
Games that I've looked at there where I go, oh, the background's amazing, and then I look at the rules and I'm like, would I ever use these rules? It's like, to go back to someone mentioned Shadowrun earlier, I love the background to Shadowrun. It's science fiction, it's cyberpunk, it's fantasy, it's all of that thrown in together. Excellent stuff, great ideas, technomancers, whatever you like. But the actual rule system just makes me want to eat my own feet.
It's interesting evolution in role-playing games over the last 20-30 years. I remember when I first started, it was the original Advanced Dungeons and Dragons with a big demon in the DM cover, and I went through from that. I played the original Shadowrun. I played Hero Systems for a while, with Champions. That was a system that had fractions involved in your character stats.
There's probably still people around nowadays still genning characters from that first Shadowrun session.
Probably. But it is, when we get to the stage now, we have stuff like
in insane asylums.
It's such a different view on what we're doing. It's become far more narrative, far less, here's all the dice. And it is, the role-playing is moving far more to a narrative stage than just rolling dice and seeing what happens.
I think as well, part of that's down, and I mean, I'm sure Alex can talk about this since he's more involved in sort of publishing than I am. I think part of that's down to the sort of the growth of like the independently published games, but not so independent published games as in here's 4 sheets of A4 sort of stapled in the corner with some photocopied like black and white artwork on it. As in no, I mean generally when I used to go to my game shop when I first used to look at the sort of independent games, they all used to be very sort of shoddily put together. And yeah, they didn't look like serious sort of contenders to be taken serious. Well, I think if you look, thanks to like print on demand and stuff like that, if you now look at a lot of independent games, they're very professionally produced. They have great artwork in them. So they can be a bit more experimental as well because they've not got sort of big companies who have to sort of like to take D&D for instance. I love the new edition of D&D, the 5th edition of D&D, without wanting to get into a whole sort of which edition is best sort of thing. There's only a certain distance they can move D&D away from its core sort of market because the company wants to appeal to that core market. It's never going to stray very far. Whereas an independent company that doesn't have such massive profit margins, they can afford to try new things, maybe be a bit experimental. And yes, there'll be some games out there that maybe don't work or maybe fall a bit short of what we're going for. But if you don't at least try different things and try new ways of doing it, you're not going to find any new sort of good or interesting ways of doing things.
Yep.
Right, Amy, you're up.
Well, we've covered a lot of my pet peeves, but I think the biggest one I've got, other than the ones we've already covered, metagaming, etc., is rules lawyering. Because in most games, the number one thing the book says is the rules aren't important, the game is about having fun, the spirit of the game. And then you've got, I don't know, sometimes it's a GM, sometimes it's a player who's there like, we have to go by the book, we have to go by these 60 billion different rules, and we're losing time actually with the roleplay experience because we're there figuring out how many dice we've got to roll, what stats are what, etc. Instead of just the GM going, right, we don't understand this, let's do it this way.
Yeah. I mean, actually, that leads on to like my pet peeve as a GM, because my first experience of GMing was when I took over the indoor lab for Vampire, which was in the northeast of England, and I ended up eventually quitting because rules lawyers, they decided to pounce so badly on a rules call that I'd made, which admittedly was possibly not correct, which would lead on to the debate of does the ref or the GM have the right to kind of make mistakes, which I think you guys can comment on that. But they basically crowded around me like a pack of hyenas, and it was quite honestly scary for someone who doesn't really have a lot of confidence in GM games to have players just swarming you like locusts, basically. So yeah. Certainly the concept of people who play it so by the rules that it actually is to the detriment of the game, for me that would be I'd be in total agreement with Amy here, that it completely destroys the game ultimately.
Yep.
Just to play devil's advocate a bit. Sorry, go ahead.
Yep.
Oh.
We all went quiet there.
Yeah, we went really quiet. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I'm English. I'm terribly polite. No, just to play devil's advocate, in terms of like the rules not being important and the sort of the story being gone, I don't know whether I necessarily agree with that 100%. I do. Don't get me wrong. I do think the story is very important, and I do, as a preference, prefer sort of more streamlined or minimalist sets of rules, because I don't like having to look through books, and I really do think it breaks up a session if someone has to go, oh well, I'm just going to flick through this 600-page like tome of rules to try and find out the rules for drowning or whatever. But I do think the rules are important. So you need to have some way for the players to know what is possible for their characters within a game. It's like if I just take D&D again, because it's a simple sort of baseline example. If you have a sort of high strength in D&D, you can be reasonably sure of what you're going to be able to accomplish with it. Whereas I think if you don't really have the sort of solid rules background there, it becomes more difficult. You have to spend a lot more time saying to the GM, well, would my character be able to do this? Would my character be able to do that? And I think that breaks up the flow just as surely as having people who too rigidly stick to the rules. So I think you almost have to sort of shoot for a sort of middle ground somewhere between those. Exactly, yeah.
Well, how would you deal with rules lawyers that are so focused on rules that if the GM does make a mistake, they kind of just challenge it in a way that is so aggressive that it actually destroys kind of the GM's confidence at all?
Well, in terms of well, yeah, that's always a good option. Those are probably my initial knee-jerk reactions as well. Go get out. But
yeah,
let's assume for the sake of argument, I was going to be a bit more diplomatic. What I'd normally do is the first thing I'd do as a GM when I make a mistake, and I did one in the character jam that Jenny participated in the other day. I made a mistake, and I contacted the players by Facebook and went, yeah, made this mistake for the next session. So the first thing is, as a GM, just sort of own up and say, yeah, you know, I've made a mistake. I was trying to move the game on, and I find genuinely a lot of players are fairly sympathetic because they know the GM's putting in a lot of work. They've got a lot on their minds. So a lot of players will say, oh, you know, fair enough. It was an honest mistake, and if you say to them, here's a potential solution, they're more willing to then sort of accept that and go, oh, well, we can see you've made a mistake, but at least you're trying to sort it out. But you are right, you will get some, I don't know, let's call them knobheads for want of a better argument, for want of a better term, that will probably pounce on you and probably try and sort of drill in and get some advantage by following the letter of the law. And to be honest, all I do is I just say, well, I made that decision at the time. I've moved on. Here's what I'm proposing to fix it, to sort of amend that, if you will. Because it's just a case of the mistake I made the other day. It was just a case of someone was trying to buy an artifact using like a merits and flaws system. The more merits you put onto something, the higher points cost. The more flaws you put on, the lower it goes. The player reduced it to effectively a 0 points cost with flaws. Fair enough. I've no even thought that the player wouldn't be able to play those flaws. I know he would be able to, but I didn't realise that as part of those rules you couldn't go to less than 1. So I got in touch with him and said, look, well, knock one of your flaws off and we'll put the points cost back up to 1. And that's all sorted. So it does depend as well on how easy or difficult it is to sort something out. And obviously if it's a mistake that led to the death of someone's like treasured character of like 5 years or whatever, that's different than just saying, oh, you've got to make a minor alteration on your character sheet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I was kind of unlucky because I had players who were, for want of a better term, they're dickheads, and they were very bullying anyway. So even when I held my hands up and said, look, you know, I've messed up, you know, they weren't really willing to kind of compromise at all. So I think in that instance, that'd be a get the hell out situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's as well. It depends on the player because I mean, although don't get me wrong, I love role playing. I do like enough YouTube videos about it. Quite happily talk about it until like the cows come home. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I can only get so serious. Mm-hmm. About role plays, if you know what I mean. And that's not to like simply blow it off and say, oh, it's just a game or it's not important, because I hate the phrase "it's just a game" because I think the effort that people put into it makes it more than a game. Mm-hmm. I see Alex.
He says with the wall of books behind him.
You know what I mean? I'll take it a bit seriously, but
just a bit, yeah.
What about, Alex? You got yourself snowed in a yurt in like the middle of nowhere just so you can role play more.
I know.
But, I think
it's part of my 20. It's part of a 20-year plan.
That's it, man. There's only so. It's like even if you know how often I die in like LARP. I die a ridiculous amount.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time. I've probably died twice while we're doing this hang, to be honest. So,
yeah.
And I know some people do get like really wound up or really sort of emotional or really sort of annoyed when the characters die. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm probably a bit more flippant than most people, to be perfectly honest, because I'm like, oh well, died again. I have to create a new character. So I'm probably a bit less emotionally involved than other people, to put it lightly. But there's only so bothered I can be about things. Like if someone came and went, even if it was something that killed my character, and went, oh yeah, sorry, I've made a bit of a rules mistake. Everyone's human. It happens. Mm-hmm. No one has like 100% memory retention for every single rule in a large tome of sort of game rules. So I think it's partly the GM having the willingness to say, yeah, I made a mistake and here's how we can sort it out. But as you rightly say, Emma, it's also partly the players not being pricks, basically.
Yeah.
The policy, I tend to follow them.
There are times when a GM just needs to ignore the rules, because one of the things that I go by is that, you know, that common sense or just fun should always trump the rules. You know, if even if the rules say that something should happen, if it makes sense that it wouldn't, then it just doesn't. You know, you kind of have to you use the rule of common sense as well. Yeah, technically the rule says that you can throw the hand grenade to that 3-inch hole a quarter mile away, but come on, really?
It's right. There's different styles of GMing, isn't there? Because there's the sort of the GM will go, right, okay, you're trying to scale this cliff to get to the final confrontation with a big bad guy standing on top of the cliff, sort of giving his evil monologue. Oh, unfortunately, you've failed your roll to climb it, and you've fallen like 1,000+ feet to your death.
Yeah.
Just because you failed that one roll. Times for you, best start genning up another character, or there's the GM will be like, well, yeah, I could have you fall down that cliff and die, but let's face it, that doesn't bring a very satisfactory climax to the end of the adventure. So I'll probably still have some sort of disadvantage occur. Like, you know, you maybe slip down a bit, you've taken a little bit of damage as you've been trying to scrabble down this cliff or whatever, and you maybe have to start again a bit. But I'm not just going to be like, that's your character dead.
Yeah, or you give them a couple chances to grab on, or whatever it happens to be. But
Exactly, yeah.
Or failures.
I think again, it's rules versus story again.
Right.
It's one of the policies I tend to follow myself as a GM is if there's a rules question comes up, and they quite often do, the policy I have in place is I'll make a call now. At the end of the session, we'll review that call, and the reviewed call is what we'll run with from here on in. One of the key things that app does is it lets players know the fact that you're not just riding roughshod over their feelings, which a lot of them feel like they've just had the rug whipped out from under them but this rule says and you've said no. I'll go, okay, just move things along just now, we'll do it this way, at the end of it we'll discuss it. And folk are very happy with this in my games. They get a chance to air their opinion, we discuss it at length without disrupting the game, and we come to an agreed solution what will happen in the future. It's an acknowledgement to players' the feelings of, but this is the rule and I was expecting that, along with, but we need to get the story moving. It's a very good policy. If players aren't willing to leave it at that point in time, then you need to have a sort of more serious discussion of, no, stop it now, I'm in charge, I'm making that call.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a policy I tend to use in my own games, like you say, make the judgment call now and then. Reach a decision going forward to reference the rules later.
That's what I tend to do when I do board games. That's what I tend to do when I do role-playing games. Because it's a good way of just getting the game going again, and you're not stuck there for 10-15 minutes while you argue about a rule.
One thing you can't do in this is let it become a personality argument. And as GMs, we've all had that, where it stops being about the rules, it's about who's going to win, me or him. That can't happen. That happens and your session's dead.
I have to think that in any sort of argument, though, to be perfectly honest, there's a point where in an argument where you reach that sort of point, and as you rightly say, it becomes more about the sort of clash of personalities and people wanting to win an argument rather than the actual sort of subject of the original discussion.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, so I do a very similar thing on the internet. I mean, you need only look at a sort of like social media like Facebook or something to see that the amount of like random arguments that sort of spring up out of someone makes a comment about something and then you're just back and forth for like until Judgment Day sort of on the comments. And to be fair, I'll generally in a sort of a conversation on something like social media and very much in games as well, I'll sort of chip in a couple of points and go, oh, that's my point made, and then if the argument just keeps going like far beyond, I'll just go, do you know what? I don't need to be a part of this anymore because it's no longer a discussion about what the point is. It's just people sort of bantering backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
So I've got another one with people being dicks in mind, actually, which is, I mean, it's sort of a bit harder to regulate in tabletop RPGs than it is possibly in live action, but the constant out-of-character talk when in very deep and meaningful in-character situations. I've had quite a few really good conversations in both tabletop and LARP where someone has just come in and just absolutely destroyed the mood just by just randomly talking about some random bullshit, basically, and that really, really gets me. And I don't know how you can really prevent it in tabletop because with it obviously being people sat around table deciding what they're going to do, that's a lot of character talk anyway. But you know, how do you stop kind of off-topic talk at least in tabletop?
I've had a bit of luck of this when I tend to run things. I have the hold your hand up rule, and when it's basically when you're actually playing a game, it should be about the game, and you shouldn't be talking about other things really. Few minor exceptions, of course, but then it's generally like I do. If you're holding your hand up, you're out of character. So it's just like, you know, if the player wants to quickly just double check a rule, like, you know, oh sorry Jim, what's the rule on like if I attack that guy, do I have to roll this dice, whatever? No, it makes it nice and easy, nice and simple, and it makes it easy and noticeable to everyone at the table that is an out of character conversation. Or what was that thing that we said to that person back there? I can't quite remember what we did. Just so I know how to go on with this. So I do like a holding up the hand, and then basically just say like work in progress. Let's keep it on the game, and that's how I sort of generally cut out a lot of sort of the background talk or people going off on one. Especially if they've got to hold their hand up set, because then they feel like a wally if they're holding up. Well, they're like, right, after this, do you want to go grab some beers? They feel like a wally doing that.
Yeah.
Well, with tabletop RPGs, what I've tried to do is to try and get everyone there like a half hour ahead of time, and just to be able to spend a half an hour just talking and bullshitting. Then they have a chance to kind of get it out of their system, catching up on, saying hi, what have you been up to, that sort of thing. Get all that out of the way. And it doesn't do away with it entirely, but it minimizes it during the game, because then they've caught up, they're all set, and then you say, okay, let's play now. So that they there's that distinction between getting there and bullshitting, and then the time to play. So it just helps them to kind of get in the mindset if they're not just naturally kind of disruptive people, which I wouldn't have them long in my game if I talked to them about it and they just wouldn't not do it, then might want to.
Yeah, I mean, I've not had it as bad in, say, tabletop games, but I know sometimes there is times where there are players that I played with recently who will literally take their phone, go up to the GM, and start talking about some random thing, which, if you're in the middle of a kind of existential crisis where you're thinking, now, is this the right thing to do for my character, because I'm quite a moral, empathetic character, and suddenly I'm like, what the fuck, what's going on here, what's this mobile phone you talk about, especially if you're playing someone who is not really, like, techie. It's just like, oh, what's this mobile phone you're speaking about? It really, certainly annoys me more in LARP RPGs, because I'm certainly playing a deep and meaningful character at the moment who does a lot of faith role play. I think that Sean, Amy, and John are well aware of this. But I've had people just walk in and start talking. Oh, I got drunk last night, blah 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 blah, and it's clear they weren't even talking in character, because I think they were 16 or something. It really got on my nerves. So it's quite interesting to see how people can actually deal with them in a way that's just not telling them to F off, basically.
I think in the case of LARP, part of that's creating a character that you can that's manageable for you personally. So I certainly know when I go to LARP myself, because Amy, you've seen me a lot, because I tend to, let's just say I like a drink or two when I go to LARP.
Just a few.
Yeah, we're not lying about this.
I think that's fair to say. But because for me and Hannah, because it is like the only sort of holiday we really go on, and it's the only time when we see some people who we sort of like hang around with there, some of our friends. We don't see them a great deal the other time. You do want to be able to sort of relax and socialise as well. But I sort of realised quite sort of early on, as Emma was saying it can be very distracting to other people. And I'm not saying that I never talk out of character when I'm at LARP, because I do, everyone does, let's face it. But one of the things I try and do is I try and create a character that I know that even if I've had a few drinks, I can play that character. So if you want to go and get like smashed on booze and get like sort of happy jolly all the time, and you lot, just play a character who likes to drink and is sort of happy and jolly and whatever.
I was going to say, I had a great example of that. I've done a little bit of LARPing, and one of the ones I did was a Call of Cthulhu LARP, and I played an alcoholic book dealer, and it was great. Now I was a little buzzed when I was drinking, but I wasn't like drunk. But I was acting much more drunk than I was, to the point where one of the other players came up to me and out of character said, "Are you okay?" Yeah, we'll play. It's okay.
Yeah, one of the best things I had at LARP was we had security come over at one point and tell us that we needed to could we help them take someone back to their tent. And there was this guy who was like so drunk he was falling about, and he couldn't stand up, he couldn't speak properly, and we were like, oh, shit.
He wasn't from the Unicorns by any chance, was he?
No. I can't remember where he was from.
Just
But,
checking. If
he was
someone
he was about it was about half a pint away from like being in the casualty ward as far as we were concerned. And we sort of carried him halfway back to his tent, and as we got sort of like halfway there, the sort of big bell they ring to let everyone on the site know that time out has happened. And as soon as that bell rang, he stood up perfectly fine, straightened himself off, and went, "Thanks very much, boys," and he walked off towards his tent. I was like, that is the most amazing roleplay I've ever seen.
Well
I would swear on my life that he was borderline drunk. And he just simply straightened himself up, straightened his clothes up, and went, "Thanks very much, lads. See you in the morning." And I feel happy as Larry.
The policy I tend to run myself when I'm at the LARP, if I went to talk to somebody out of character, we'll normally depart to somebody's tent. We'll take ourselves out of the role playing so we're not disrupting anyone else.
That's it. Yeah.
I mean, it's there's a couple of folk, sort of friends, very close friends I've got down in Newcastle that I often see a lot at the LARP, and I don't get to see them a lot else other times. So I want to make sure I take that time to see my friends. But the folk that do it out of character, and there's a guy in particular who also from Newcastle that no longer goes to the LARP, was renowned for his ability to walk up and start talking to you out of character, regardless of if you were
I know who this is.
I wonder who it is as well.
Yeah, no, we don't need to mention names. I don't think they live in Newcastle anymore.
But the only way to deal with him
that's serious. They moved cities just because of a role.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You take your roleplay hardcore down in Newcastle.
Absolutely.
I may have said something at some point.
Yeah, I think he got banned from several role-playing games and metagaming and out of character talk during in-character situations. So, yeah, I know exactly who Sean's talking about.
I think it's the same thing, to bring it back to tabletop as well. It's very much the same thing with that. I mean, take for instance that if I was involved in a game and let's say, for example, like the party had been like split into two groups and the GM's off dealing with like the other two people, and let's say normally what I'd try and do is I'd try and have like an in-character chat with like the other person who's not involved with it, or you might say, "Oh, is it all right if we do like sort of like a little flashback between the two of us and we jump back and like play a conversation we had like while we were out on the road, like before we got to this dungeon or whatever." And if you can do that, that's great. That'll be my preference. If I can't do that for some reason, and I still want to talk to that person, because obviously you don't want to be sat there like not saying anything for like 2 hours or however long it takes to get back to you. I'll at least, as you say, try and move a little bit away so I'm not interfering with the main action. And even if it's just sort of like moving the chairs aside a bit and lowering the volume of my voice while I'm talking with that person, I'm interfering with anyone else who's like more actively involved in it. I think it's just a matter of common courtesy at the end of the day.
That's what a lot of it is, really. It's just, just being aware of the people around you and being courteous. I mean, I suppose a lot of the pet peeves could be fit into that category.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it. I mean, when we're talking about like sort of banter in terms of like people talking out of character during games, I think a certain amount of it is bound to happen because, as you say, games are mainly designed for people to have fun and enjoy themselves, and people do tend to naturally sort of get very excited and very sort of like worked up when they are enjoying themselves. And I think a certain amount of out of character talking is an inevitable result of that. I don't think you'd ever clamp down on that 100%, and I don't even think you'd really want to, because as a GM, I enjoy looking at the players, and even if they're having a bit of a laugh and a joke about an aside someone's made, as long as it's not massively derailing the plot or stalling the game, great, they're enjoying themselves. Brilliant. Quality. They're engaged with the game. I think it's only when it stalls the game to such a degree that it really becomes a problem, when there's more of that out-of-character talking than there is in-game getting involved within the game, that it becomes a problem.
Right, I think it's different if it's an out-of-character joke that was spawned by something in the game versus just an out-of-character joke that has nothing to do with the game because they're not paying attention. That sort of thing. Big difference.
What's up? We had when we played at when myself and Jenny played in Sean's Warhammer game, and we had like Matthew's character at one point. He made some like ridiculously like poor roll when he was getting attacked by someone while he stood by a second-story window in like a sort of oldie worldy style inn, and he ended up falling out of this window and sort of braining himself on the ground below. unharmed, but knocked himself out basically. And then like every time you went near a window for the rest of the game, you'd be like, you might just want to step away from that a bit, Matthew, as a character. You know, don't want to take any more chances. Or whenever he was like, oh, I'm going to leap heroically over this, we're like, are you sure? you wouldn't rather like fall down and crack your noggin on the curb with it? It's where you could have. So yeah, I think it is very different. Like you say, if it's just sort of comedy and stuff that's related to the game, and I think almost it does show involvement in the game, because if people are getting involved to such an extent that they almost want to be like embroidering it and adding extra bits to the game and extra layers of enjoyment to themselves for the game, as long as that's not exclusively what you enjoy about the game and there's nothing else, that's absolutely fine. But I think that's going to be the case for a lot of the points we bring up. It's only when it's taken, like anything in life. Someone's calling on the roleplay phone.
Oh dear.
I think it's only going to be a problem when like anything in life, when it's taken to an extreme and sort of pushes out common sense, it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I think if it adds flavour to the game, it's fine. I think it is when it just completely destroys the mood, particularly if it's an intense roleplay experience that you're going through. You know, we did a Cthulhu LARP a while back. And right in the point where it was a really intense scene in a room, because it's 1930 setting, we were dealing with the wife of a husband who'd been killed by, well, we didn't realise it was her because she was an evil cultist, but someone decided to come in behind us, go on the piano and start doing the do 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 do. And to be fair, that was really hilarious, but it just, at that point where the tension, I mean, it was the only game where I literally cried and wanted to go home. So, you know, it's finding the balance between, you know, adding flavour and enjoyment, because it's clear from what John's saying that, you know, some of the things that you've had have really kind of helped to enhance the game. And then you've got the flip side where it's just kind of taken away from that kind of otherworldly experience.
Yeah, I remember I had a game once where we joked around out, like, because I'd made loads of really bad rolls throughout the entire course of the game, and I basically, we got to this roll and it was like, Drew, you can roll whatever you like on this dice, but if you roll a 1, you're going to fail. And of course I rolled a 1. I don't even remember what the game is now, but I remember just being like, anytime it got to the, like, I got given a dice to roll after that point, I passed it to someone else and said, you do it because you're having better luck than me. And then even they would roll badly on my rolls. So just like that entire game, like, I just couldn't do anything. Like, I couldn't, like, there was even a roll I had to make, and it was just like my character would be dead, I'd be out of the game. And you know when you're just getting bad rolls and you just like, I just want to be out of this. Even then, that's when I started rolling really well, was when you know, the roll to see if you die check. Even then I was I rolled well because of that.
Roleplay phone.
But,
it's going to be like Batman with Adam West, where like the statue lights up.
the little D20 that lights up.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, like, I don't even remember what that game is, but I remember.
Like that.
Yeah, something like that. But I was just saying, like, yeah, I don't remember what the game I was playing at the time, but I do remember that I rolled so terribly that even when I was trying to die, I couldn't die.
We've got a friend of ours in one of my face-to-face groups who rolls so terribly that I've actually deliberately picked the system we're playing the game in, just to take into account the fact that he always rolls consistently terribly. So the reason I've picked sort of Dungeon World as a game system to use is because basically in Dungeon World you have like, you roll 2d6 plus your stat, and you can the results you can get are basically a 10 plus, you've succeeded, fun times for everybody. 7 to 9, you've still succeeded, but there's been some sort of complication or little sort of extra plot wrinkle that's been thrown in. Or you get a 6 or less, which is basically the GM decides what happens, but it's normally not going to be particularly pleasant for you.
Yeah.
And that's the equivalent to a failure. However, you get an XP every time you get one of these 6 or less rolls. So that guy in the game, he is like the most ultimately powerful in terms of XP, but it doesn't change the fact that all his rolls inevitably failed during the game. So he's happy. He's got abilities, a go-getter on his like character sheet. He's happy as Larry, but it doesn't change the fact that he doesn't really use most of those abilities because he always fails so abysmally with his rolls when he does it.
Yeah, I mean, like I like that sort of dice rolling system. It's one of the reasons I liked Star Wars: Age of Empire, because you just had successes or fails, and you rolled, and if you got more successes than fails, you did the thing that you were trying to do, and if you didn't do it, and that was it. That was the worst you could get, unless there is one dice result which is like terribly bad thing happens, but.
I do keep meaning to try Age of Empire, but it's the whole lot having to buy like loads of extra dice puts me off a bit, to be perfectly honest.
No, it's not too bad. It's like a tenner
I'm
and you get all
planning
the
on
dice.
actually running the game because Sean maybe getting me copies of it. So I mean, I really liked it when Drew ran the game that we played. I was really annoyed when we didn't actually get to play anymore. But
that's just down to my like.
That's just because you want to play it, not.
I was like, I really want to play it and not GM it.
Plus, it is a fantasy flight game, so I'm not sure whether I could handle the second mortgage to buy the books, to be perfectly honest. I love fantasy flight games. I've got a lot of the sort of 40k stuff that they did, but there is no getting around the fact that their books are expensive. They are beautiful books. They are hard copies. They are lovely. They're full colour. They're brilliant. The artwork's quality, but it doesn't change the fact they are rate expensive.
Yeah, you get your money's worth, but you pay for your money's worth.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I say, especially now, as I was saying earlier, with independent sort of games for a fraction of the cost, but with very professional sort of finishing and with production values on them. There's no longer such a gap between the two types of books, where previously I might have gone, oh yeah, well all the independent stuff's a bit scrappy. I'll just save up and I'll buy that professionally published one. Whereas now I'll probably go, do you know what? All the independent stuff's quite well done, and I could probably buy 4 independent games for the price of that, and as well as getting the extra thing that you're supporting sort of the smaller sort of independent publishers, you're also getting mo game for your money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, in regards to...
Although, I have to admit I have a soft spot for the old Judges Guild. I don't know how many of you remember Judges Guild material for D&D.
No.
Judges Guild was so yeah, I'm old now. Judges Guild was an old publisher, and they used to publish all sorts of maps and settings and just all kinds of stuff for for D&D, and the artwork in it was just horrendous. It looked like a 12-year-old, and he drew it on a shaking table, but the content was awesome. I mean, some of the stuff they produced was, they did all these villages with just incredible detail in the characters and in the setting descriptions and so forth. So, I mean, I still use a lot of it to this day. If I need a quick town, I'll just grab an old Judges Guild and pick one.
I mean, I think in terms of, I was talking about this with someone the other day, and I think it's a case of, as people have got sort of less and less money to spend on luxuries, and let's face it, RPGs, as much as we love them, and obviously we all do because we're all here talking about them, the fact is they are a luxury purchase, they're not a necessity. So I think as people have got more, so they've got less luxury money to spend sort of across the board, they're wanting that money to go a bit further, they're sort of demanding a bit more for their money.
Yeah.
Although to be fair, an RPG is a pretty good bang for your buck if you consider, once you buy the books, you've got literally endless amount of time of playing it. So
obviously I don't support
DVD.
Obviously I don't support the policy of buying lots of RP books.
I moved house recently. There were so many books for the role playing. There's so many boxes for the role playing books. It was getting to the stage of going, do I really play all these? Do I need them all? Yes, I do. I do.
Yeah, I mean, I've got. I know when they did the sort of OGL stuff for like D&D 3.5, I know lots of people sort of decried it and went, oh, yeah, there was an awful lot of rubbish printed under sort of. And yeah, there was. Don't get me wrong. There was an awful lot of like cash-in sort of filler books that were bought out to sort of push some D20 stuff. Yeah. But I've got loads of D20 books. I don't really run D20 much, but even if I've picked up a load of books cheap on second hand since they sort of stopped doing D&D 3.5 as much. And even if I only sort of like use a few ideas out of them, or even just enjoy reading them and never use them, well, I've probably got my money's worth as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I find even if I buy a role-playing game that I don't like the system of, I'll quite often pirate the setting and the system from somewhere else and just sort of mesh them to make them something interesting.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I do that a lot. If I find a background I really, really like, but I don't like the system, I find the easiest way to use that background is just go, this is Big Eye Small Mouth, you need 2d6 to play it. Boom.
Yeah, I do exactly the same. I go, oh, I'll take that background there and I'll run it with Fate.
I mean, I remember one time I actually put together a wee home. It wasn't quite. It was a new system, a new setting. I was just sort of went, this is a great idea. I want to try this out, and I did just sort of grab D20 game and went, okay, this is sort of nice, basic. Everyone understands this. I can use that to make it the game, and it was a sort of the Age of Sail with the sort of the pirates and everything, sort of Johnny Depp and all the rest of it. Mix that with the fantasy setting with sort of orc reavers and sort of proper actual ghost ships and dark elves in the high seas with the cannons and the
Nice.
And I put together this wee thing, tweaked the rules a little bit in firearms so that instead of being 10 rounds to reload, it's 5, so it's possible to reload if you really need to. But it worked out really well. We had people sort of buying 3-4 different pistols and sort of pistol, sword fight, pull out another pistol and shoot somebody from a distance. So much you can do with a role-playing system. It's limited by your imagination, as it says in almost every book. But this was a fantastic game, and I really enjoyed it.
Back in the 80s, we were playing D&D. I think it was at that time we were playing maybe 2nd edition, and we decided we wanted to be a little more lethal, so we tacked on the critical hit system from Rollmaster. And it was a really smooth addition because they actually, I don't know if you've ever read the Rollmaster material, but they actually give like conversion charts in each book, you know, for converting to a 3D6 system, to a percentile system. You know, they basically give a pretty easy conversion chart, and it actually worked pretty seamlessly for us. So we ended up using the combat charts and the critical system, and it worked out really well for us. So I'm a big fan of mashing up stuff like that when you can. But
I think we diverged somewhat.
Yeah.
What was those comments about derailing we had earlier?
That's the beauty of like role-playing, rambling conversation.
That's great.
So 1 hour.
Yeah. Well, we've basically talked about. Has anyone else got pet peeves as a player before we kind of move solely onto GM and then we've got I think we've got 3 or 4 questions that have been sent over from players. So
I've got one, but I'll let Drew go first.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks very much. No, I was just going to say I really hate a bad GM.
And that's kind of fundamental, yeah.
Don't be around the bush, man. Say what you really think.
No, it's exactly like there's a few people I've played in on games, and it's so clear that they want to tell the particular story that they want to tell, and they won't budge at all. You got to go into this. You know what I'm saying about they don't have any leeway in the story. Like the story's got to be done the way the story is told. They have no creative way. And I know, like you can't, like as you say, we've talked about it a little bit. Like you can't give the players, you shouldn't give the players so much freedom that, as I say, they can go off and get married in the middle of the story when it doesn't make sense. But
yeah, the hard railroad is a tough one.
It's one of those you kind of got to have a bit of a well, you kind of got to have a bit of structure in there, but you can't have so much structure that it's like, right, you're going to do this, because otherwise you're just playing whatever the GM. You might as well say, GM, what are we doing next? Because you're going to tell us.
Yeah. It's interesting. We've had 2 comics that exemplify 2 different styles of GM. We have DM of the Rings, which is what you're talking about there, through the railroading. the great scene in the Tombs. We were very specific kind of tired then, are we? And you have the Star Wars role-playing comic, whose name I can't remember, Darths and Droids.
Oh,
Whose
God,
GM
yeah.
is constantly going, the players are completely off the rail, and he
I
tries to
love that.
accommodate it. It's the two different styles of GM, and there's anything's going to be find a middle ground somewhere in there. But both, there's two different things you have.
I played in one where a GM, literally would not let us leave a town. No matter what we tried, it was like an episode of the Twilight Zone. No matter what we did, we were not allowed to leave the town. We took a cart and left the first time, and we hit a mysterious rock in the road that broke our wheel for no readily apparent reason. So we had to go back to town. And no matter what we did, because he wanted us to explore the town more thoroughly. So it became really frustrating because it was clearly the DM trying to manipulate us to do to follow his specific storyline. I mind the GM having a kind of a general storyline in mind, but when it's that that manipulative, I get kind of frustrated with it.
There's an interesting sort of thing my big brother advised me to do at one point, and it's a fantastic idea, is I've stopped setting scenes in specific areas. If I need this scene to go ahead, I figure out where it can go ahead. The players, say I've got a Wild West game, I need them to go and bump into this gunman. I'm planning to meet them at the tavern. They go nowhere near the tavern. So fine, you bump into a gunman in the grocery store, you bump into them at the church, somewhere. You stop worrying about where the players are meeting stuff, except for very specific situations, and generally just have the encounters happen wherever the players go. It stops the GM getting to that, need to hold on.
Yeah, I think I'd also agree with the fact, I was going to say, my sort of like pet peeve as a player would be inflexible GMs, and I think that sort of leads on nicely from what you were saying, where GMs. Because I love it in a role-playing game that I'm GMing when the players do something like unexpected, as long as it fits with that world. If it's something I don't expect, that's great. Because if everything goes 100% according to what I've got written down on the sort of session plan, then I know everything that's going to happen. There's no real interest or spark of sort of originality in it, for want of a better term, for me. Whereas if the player characters do something I don't expect, granted, I might have to do a bit more work to sort of accommodate it, but at least it gets me thinking rather than me just sort of going through my notes, A, B, and C. To give an example of a GM we had once, I was playing in a Deadlands game once, and for those of you who don't know, Deadlands is a sort of Wild West game with horror bits thrown in. Obviously, it's more than that. It's just a very simple explanation. But effectively, each place in the Deadlands world has what's called a fear rating. The bigger the fear rating, the more unpleasant the place is, the more monsters are lurking about. Fear rating 0 is like the real world. There are no unnatural beasties about it, etc. And we walked into a town, and the GM said, "This place has fear rating 4." Now, having never played Deadlands before back then, I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And he flicked through the pages of his book, and he looked at the book, and he went, the shadows of the town seem to lengthen and coalesce like a miasma of despair hanging over the citizenry. And I sort of scratched my head, for a bit, and looked at him in confusion and said, but what does that actually mean? Because he was so inflexible, all he did was he just read out the same paragraph again. I stopped him halfway through, and I was like, "Yeah, I know that. I know there's long shadows. There's a miasma of despair hanging over the town. So yeah, I get that." So
it was like tech support.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was like someone reading from one of the scripts, like say when you get the telephone support lines. And all he had to say to me was like, "It means there's some creepy shit going down, and everyone's well scared of it." That had done me. But the fact he just kept repeating, and I was like, no, because to be honest, I couldn't tell you what, beyond the more general terms, what a miasma of despair is. A miasma is something that's like fairly sort of nebulous on its own anyway. If you were describing like a town and someone said, well, what's this place like? And they went, oh, bit of a miasma of despair hanging over the main street. You'd be like, you what? I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, it's GMs that are very inflexible. They, as you guys are saying, they have a very sort of set idea and aren't willing to sort of look outside that sort of little bubble or even elaborate on it to help the game along. And I think, as we said earlier, it's down to both GMs and players, sort of a bit of give and take, a bit of to and fro, to make the game work together.
I think there's obviously different GMs have different styles, but I fundamentally believe that if you don't have flexibility as a GM, then your players aren't going to have as good a time. But having said that, going back to something we were talking about earlier, you have to remember GMs are human beings, and if they've written this campaign themselves, they might need someone to go from A to B. And I think there comes a point, if it's getting derailed too much as the GM, if you didn't think about it enough maybe, you have to say, look guys, I'm sorry, I need you to go from A to B because this isn't working. Or, maybe just take a break, take half an hour, call some time and work out what you're going to do next.
See, I would say that if the GM's written in a game that's sort of so derailed by just players not going from one point to another, then that's bad planning on behalf of the GM. I can't think of any games that I've ever written sort of in the last sort of few years where the players just not going from one point to another could like derail the entire session. Because obviously, as you say, you're absolutely right. GMs are individuals, and you have to sort of take that into account. But as a GM, surely you also have to think, well, what are the players going to do? A GM should surely be aware that in every situation there is the potential for players to like wander off track, and you can try and sort of keep them on the straight and narrow. But rather than sort of worrying about it or thinking, oh, the game's derailed if they do go off track, I'd rather think, well, let's assume they are going to go off track. All I'll do is I'll put in some contingencies or I'll make some plans for some alternate encounters or whatever I can use that I can bring in if they do sort of one off track. So my game's not derailed, and I've still got stuff I can bring without having to sort of do everything ad hoc and try and come up with loads of stuff on the spot, which obviously never sounds as convincing as like if you've planned it.
I agree that.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, just like much like you said, like obviously you kind of got to be prepared for the players. I remember I played a bit of a role-playing game called Scion, where you play the son of a god from like various mythologies, and I played a son of Loki. So one of my character's powers was that I could basically lie to someone, and they would just believe it to be the truth no matter what I said. Which is a very, very cool. That's a very good one for role-playing. Yeah, that's just one of the. That's one of the starting powers. I'll tell you about one of the god powers you get later in the game. But you get this power that basically, I had this power that basically meant I could just lie to someone and they'd believe it to be the truth. And so knowing this, the GM prepared certain characters. If they had to deliver certain story points, if I tried using my power to disrupt that, he would just be like, right, well, like we had to go to this nightclub to speak to this particular person, and we had to get in. And we weren't meant to be in the nightclub. So I tried lying and say, like, yes, we are meant to be in here. We are on the list. That's our names. And he went, no, it's not. I've got these glasses that see through the lies you're telling me. So very small things like that meant we had, he'd fought his way around it. But then I say, this is a game where much later on in the storyline, if you go to, that's where you start out and you've just become, you've just found out you're the son of a god and you get a few powers. Later on in the game, you can become full-blown god, and there's one power which is basically you can turn around and go, I don't think this thing exists to me, and then it just stops existing. So someone turned around and was like, oh, I'm in a burning building because I'm saving someone. They went, I don't think fire exists, and fire just stopped existing to them. So they had to, like I say, the DM had to come up with ways around that sort of thing when he just turned around and go, oh, that doesn't exist to me anymore.
Well, I think there's looking at it from a game perspective. I think there's I think part of it's on the players to use what I think was kind of good metagaming.
Yeah.
Like if you can usually tell when the GM is throwing you a hook.
Yeah.
And so you all want to, it's kind of like you all want to play together as players, So it's kind of on the players to find reasons for the characters to get along. You know, it's also on them to if they see a hook being thrown at them to pick it up because they want to play in the game. So it's a give and take. But if it's
did you ever try taking the opposite power in Scion, which is where you can tell someone a lie and they think you're telling the truth? Because that's an even better power as far as I'm concerned. It sounds rubbish written in the book, actually amazing. But you can walk out of like a bank holding like 2 bags marked swag full of money, and a policeman will be like, "Have you robbed that bank?" And you'll be like, "Yes, officer, I have robbed that bank." Use your power, and he's like, "You're obviously lying. You didn't rob that bank. Stop wasting my time. Move along." You're like, "Thank you very much, officer. Goodbye."
Good joke again.
That sounds so much fun.
Well, I mean, there was like
Scions of Loki for the win.
Yeah, those Scion of Loki, you just turn around and go like, what are you on about? You're not a cop. And they're like, oh, you're right, I'm not. I'm on our way to a fancy dress party. They just believe you.
Yeah.
Of course, you have to pass certain checks and whatnot. You don't just work all the time, because otherwise you would just win the entire game just by going, you need to go and get this thing for the quest. Oh, I've already got it. What are you on about? It's here. But no.
Okay, I think Sean's got one last player-related peeve, and then we're going to move on to GM-specific ones. So, Sean, fire away.
This is one that does tend to bother me. It's when I'm playing the game and the setting makes no sense. It's one of those, there's a keep here. Why is there a keep here? We're in the middle of fucking nowhere near anything else, but there's a keep here. We need to have this keep. There's keeps here, you have to go there. Why? Or stuff like this, so when you're looking through it and going, this makes no logical sense, but the GM hasn't put any thought into it, so you've got this disjointed thing apart from the very key things that are very detailed. They let you know, this is important, the rest of it isn't. It's frustrating as a player. It's hard to judge what's going on without context.
Fair.
Yeah. I think that kind of makes sense, yeah. I think if you're game building as GM, as we're moving on to GM peeves, like if you are going to spend the time actually creating a world, a storyline, everything in theory should make logical sense. But then on the other hand, I mean, in terms of a peeve, trying to predict how players will react, because there may be something where they will come up and say, well, why don't you have this, this, and this? And then you're like, shit, you have to come up with things on the fly. I think someone said earlier, and I honestly can't remember because I've had too much beer, but, I think certainly things should make sense in a common sense kind of way, which obviously common sense is oxymoron in this day and age. But having something there that just is there for no apparent reason either kind of flags up red alarm bells in my head, because it's obviously clearly something that has to happen for a plot reason, which frankly doesn't really make sense in a story kind of way, because it's not seamless. I think it should not just go boop, 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 sort of thing. But yeah, I think I agree with what Sean's saying in my inebriated state.
Shameless.
I know, it's terrible. Yeah, so moving on. I don't have many GM and peeves, mainly because I have far more experience as a player. One main one I have as GM, and it does also link into being a player, is I find it hard as a GM if I've got an established group, and it's been a very long time since I have GM'd an established group, being able to accommodate newbies. And I know that John and I talked about this a while back, specifically for LARP, because I hadn't done a lot of role-playing before I started doing LARP, and then having to deal with the idea that you had quite a lot of veteran players who were very, very well established, clearly had a lot of power, and it's very hard to break into the game and make a lot of influence. And that was the same with tabletop and indoor LARP, where as a GM I felt it was sort of my responsibility to try and help them as much as I could without kind of ignoring veterans and finding the balance. I don't know how many of you actually have established campaigns which last long enough to have veteran players, and then people who just decide that they're going to start joining in or what. But how would you deal with a situation where players who come in do feel alienated?
It very much depends on the skill of the newbie I find in that situation. I've had a long-standing campaign running for a while, and then one of the players had to leave. He had to move to Newcastle. Don't know why he wanted to go there, but he did. At that point, I had a new guy getting brought in, but the guy who was getting brought in is somebody I knew could really throw himself into a character, could throw himself into a system, and he did. He slotted right in without an issue. But again, I've had the players that haven't slotted in well. I've had the players that are awkward, or the ones that are socially shy. At that point, you need to do something more as a GM to bring them in. Quite often, one person I had was very socially shy. When I was bringing him in, it was into a new campaign, and I made the campaign setting around his brother, who he'd already told me had died in a tragic fire. But this was actually going to be the big bad guy, and he didn't know about it. I was going to make sure this drags him in, and he's involved in everything that way, and it's not immediately obvious from the beginning. It lets him time to settle in and then become part of it.
I think I've had quite negative experiences as a newbie. Certainly when I started playing LARP. I mean, I was very reluctant to do roleplay of any sort because, well, Sean knows someone who I used to live with who spent all of their rent money on LARP, and he got himself banned from Lorien Trust. So Sean knows exactly who he is. But basically, you know, it took me a good few years before Becca actually persuaded me to even try it. And then when I actually turned up, you know, there were, I mean, I wouldn't say the ST storyteller was negligent anyway. You know, I can't really fault him. But there was so much going on, and then there was veteran players who, you know, in an in-character kind of sense, they weren't even, they didn't really have any responsibility to look after me. But, you know, from an out-of-character perspective, you know, someone coming in, you know, you want to actually retain players, not actually want to drive them away. So for me, you know, it was like, how do you find the balance between, you know, trying to look after newbies as a GM and at the same time not ignoring everyone else?
I think in terms of role-play campaigns, I tend, certainly with tabletop, I tend to prefer campaigns that have a sort of finite sort of lifespan, rather than the sort of like the big opening sort of rambling sort of never going to end potentially sort of open-ended campaigns. And there's nothing wrong with open-ended campaigns. Just I find personally that if there's a sort of story to be told in a campaign, and then that story is told and it's finished, it's like someone doing a film. Let's say they do a trilogy of popular films. I don't know, maybe it'd be a sci-fi film or something, and all of the stories told in those initial 3 films. Then later on, someone goes, "Oh, I think we can milk a bit more sort of mileage out of this background that we've come up with in this sort of whole setting," and they bang out another 3 films. Once that original story's been told that the world was created for, it's very rarely that any sort of tacked on stories or any sort of additional stuff has the same feel as the original stuff in my experience. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some campaigns, if the campaign's deliberately created with that idea in mind that it's going to have multiple stories, it can be great for sort of multiple plots, etc. But I also prefer a sort of finite span of plot because it stops this whole thing where you have people. I mean, it doesn't happen so much in tabletop because there's a higher sort of player character attrition in most tabletops than there is in LARP. Certainly the festival systems like Lorien Trust, but it stops a situation where you get like a new person coming in and going, "Oh, I've got this starting level character," and someone else going, "Oh, I'm a level 300 vampire warlock who shoots lightning out of his penis when he rolls an 18 plus, etc., or whatever." You don't get that situation where you have the new player going, "Well, I'm never going to sort of reach those levels of powers because by the time I've moved up, that other person is also going to have realistically sort of moved up that ladder." Whereas if everything's also nice and finite and it's kept within that sort of little span, effectively everyone's starting off from that same point again.
So it looks like we have enough time for maybe a couple more GM-related peeves and then questions. I don't know if this thing actually stops at 9:30 or what. If you guys have to tell me. No. Oh, so we can do however we want. I'll get in.
8 hours maximum.
As people start passing out from too much alcohol.
Yeah, you guys can carry on.
The last one we'll just have to close the chat. Yeah.
All right, cool. Whoever really wants to shout out about their GM related peeves, then. Okay, I'll bite actually, because we haven't actually covered the concept of metagame. We have vaguely talked about it. And I know John and I had a discussion about this because I really don't like people using in-character knowledge when they've heard out character and then obviously utilising it in a way to benefit their character in a way that is blatantly cheating. However, I know that John and I talked about a situation where he's actually sort of metagamed in a way to try and welcome newbies into a system, which is, I guess, a mild form of it. And I know that I spoke to Lindsay actually on Christmas Day about this, John, because we were talking about this. And I said actually that would be something, for example, if you had a group that you really wanted to actually establish a really good group dynamic. However, for some reason, the personalities in the group really wouldn't ever work together in a way normally, but you really had to establish some form of party. Let's say a D&D group for simplicity's sake. How you would avoid actually killing each other because you're all dickheads to each other. I mean, I've had to pretty much stop myself from killing a character in the system I'm playing in a minute because I seriously hate her character. And I hope she's not watching this because I'll be screwed otherwise. But, you know, that sort of mild metagaming I would accept. However, you know, I've had to actually stop someone literally from... I'll give you the big example. A character in the Law and Trust game that we go to, he died at the last one, which was in August, and then next day he came up to me and was spouting about the special skills that my character had, and it turns out that he was playing his cousin and apparently had been told by his late cousin through a letter of exactly who I was, exactly what I was, and he turned around and came up to me and said, oh, so it's about the paladin. I turned around and I went ape shit. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? How the hell do you know this? I've never told you. I don't even know your name, for fuck's sake. And I really had a go at him. To be fair on him, he is a very inexperienced role player, and so I gave him benefit of doubt. But I think if it had been anyone else, I probably would have dragged him to a ref at that point. But yeah, what kind of situations would you find as a GM actually acceptable for a player to metagame, if any?
Well, you've covered the main one there for me, which is I've played all manner of sort of characters at LARP, some pleasant, some less so. And the fact is, I've had people who are obviously new to the system come up to me and start talking to me because obviously they're keen to get involved in the game. And even if I'm playing a particularly less pleasant character, it's like the one I'm playing at the moment who has no compunction about killing someone.
You're playing a red cap, aren't you?
Yeah. Has no compunction about killing someone who annoys him. If it was someone who was like new to the system and they came up and they started talking to me, granted it may be more in character for me to be very rude to them and to tell them to get lost at worst or attack them at best. However, since I'm not there to like ruin anyone's sort of game or weekend, if they're sort of new to the system, I'd probably moderate that sort of in-character behaviour to give them the idea that I'm not particularly pleasant, but stopping short of actually doing any damage to their character. Because, yeah, okay, you could say that, oh, they've gone and spoke to the wrong person and they've learned a valuable lesson that they should be a bit more careful with who they go up and start being friendly and chatty with. But it's not a particularly satisfying roleplay experience when you get to a new event. You're like, oh, I've got all my kit ready. I'm keen. I'm excited. I'm good to go. I'm just gonna go up and chat to that person there. I've died. I've got to go and create a new character and worry about a new kit and stuff.
Yeah, I think we had a situation in LT where someone actually died within 30 seconds of actually being like in their first ever game, their first ever season, and to be fair, they actually really handled it well. And I don't know if this was the faction that we were in or the refs or whatever, because they let him basically restat exactly the same but as his brother, and that worked out well because, you know, to be fair, I always think there should be some form of grace period anyway, but you know, that's semantics free.
My favourite was the guy who died 3 times at one event.
Was that you?
No, it wasn't me. It was me. I only die like once at an event top.
Yeah.
So I might die at like the next 3 events, but only once at each event.
Yeah. I mean,
So we do.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No, I mean, for me, like, let's say if it was a tabletop kind of scenario, I mean, this is for a LARP scenario as well. As a GM or a player, if someone actually knows IC knowledge out of character, I mean, I've had to call people on this before. You know, we've had conversations where, you know, when you're a GM and you're talking to a specific player about something they've actually found out for a role that they've had on their skills, and you hear everyone else hearing all about this, and they're obviously thinking that you're passing on the information. Well, no, we're not. No. When I actually pass on information, I will tell them. Or I'll say, I pass on this information now. I've had a couple of people not that long ago actually like say, right, we're going to go and do this now. And I said, well, hang on, I've not told you this. You need to wait until I know exactly what's happened. And I mean, to be fair, I think the GM was quite clear as well. And I mean, you know him, John. And also a really good thing that he did as a GM was a situation where I'd been wounded quite badly, and this also relates to one of the questions someone's going to ask us later, which is funny. But I'd had to go back onto the dropship because this is a weird sci-fi game, and the GM, bless him, I mean, he came up with the best scenario ever. He said, right, go into the other room. You've got your Kindle, which is connected to Wi-Fi, which has the Facebook group that you can send messages on. So you now have only communications through text to the group, which was fantastic because some form of plot had altered communications anyway. And so I was there sending them messages, you know, the other room. So I didn't get to see what they were doing. So they're at risk of metagaming. I don't know if it was that he did trust me. I don't really care, to be honest. I think it was actually a brilliant strategy. But, you know, at some point, communications goes dead. So I'm like, right, they're all dead. I'm fucking off in the dropship. And I kind of left them all to it. But, you know, things happened that they all got saved, so it was all good. But, you know, what kind of strategies would you as a GM kind of try to avoid people from doing, you know, the obvious metagame by overhearing people through various rules calls or, you know, general plot points that, you know, inevitably people do get to hear it, but it's, you know, how do you handle that?
I've done the way I generally handle it is like I try and split up the room. So if someone's not in the room or someone's not a part of the adventure at that point, they go out of the room, I do it all. Of course, if they listen in and try and use the information they've heard, I just simply go, well, how do you know that? How does your character know that? And he's like, because I've overheard it. And I'm like, well, you can't do it then, because you don't know about it, unless you can explain to me how you know about it.
Yeah.
If they can't explain to me how the character knows about it in a reasonable manner, it hasn't happened. If they insist upon it, I'm like, fine, you go and try and do it, and a meteorite falls out of the space, happens to land on your character. No, you can't make character saves. It's already happened. Your head's exploded. Thank you very much for coming.
Oh, everyone's happy.
That's one tactic. I'm not saying it's useful for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I admittedly haven't had that many people just blatantly metagame, which is great. It's just there is always the risk, and it has been like a couple of times not that long ago where people have just overheard things I think that's because the system that we're doing now is vaguely based on the culture novels, and so it's very sci-fi based, but it's an amalgamation of so many different systems. I think there's a bit of Star Wars in there for some reason, but it's a self-created system, and we have the ability to upload and download skills, so we can remove skills and put new ones in, depending on the situation, which is absolutely great if you have absences in players, because then you don't really have to miss a lot of people and they can just be off running the ship, whatever. But it's when you're, like, I think I was the only person who actually had communications, so I was scanning loads of stuff, and then they were overhearing and saying, all right, we're going to do this, and I should turn around and said, you know what, you haven't heard this yet, fuck off. And I think for me, it's really frustrating.
I mean, generally, if it's stuff that one person needs to know, rather than sending anyone out of the room or rather than moving that person out of the room, I try and do my best to do it via, like, post-it notes or whatever like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, much like we did with the Star Wars, the Age of Empire game that we did, I'd pass out notes to people and stuff like that at certain points. So then it was then what they revealed. And I think you did a brilliant one where you didn't reveal something you knew right until the very end.
What did I reveal? I have no idea.
Oh God, I can't remember. I think I passed you a note, and you said you knew something about the security system, but you didn't tell everything to them. So they went in and they did it, and you were like, "Oh yeah, by the way, if you'd failed that test, we all would have died," or something like that.
Oh yeah, like I was a former Imperial officer who gotten away and killed a superior officer or whatever. Yeah, well, that was fun.
Yeah, it was like something really stupid like that. But like that was something fun for you because you were like, "Excellent, I know this. I'm not going to tell them that." But that only works if however fast you can write and how eligible your handwriting is.
I think in terms of how you try and stop people from like overhearing stuff and what measures you take. Generally, I don't, to be perfectly honest. Granted, I mean a lot of the gaming I'm doing is online at the minute, but I've used the methods like passing notes out and messages and sending people out of the room and whatever. But I generally don't. I mean, I think part of this, part of the problem with metagaming is this assumption of the lowest common denominator. I mean, I always like to start off with the fact that if I've got a player, let's say it's a player I don't know at all, I'll start off with the basic assumption that they're going to be a reasonable, sensible player. Until they actively prove that that's not the case. And then I'll obviously start dealing with that. But I think it's exactly. I think it's a problem to go into it assuming that there's going to be a problem when a lot of the time there actually isn't really. I mean, most of the games I've previously run, there's been times when a party's been split, but I've still had other people in the room or in the hangout or whatever, and they've heard what's going on. But because I know the players and I trust them, never been necessary for me to go, right, well, I'm going to do this whole thing via PM or I'm going to send them out to the room or something like that.
Well, it brings up the point of trust between the GM and the player. You have to be able to trust your players that they're not going to utilize that information. And I think the part where it gets really hard is when like if a situation came up where the player just knows there's a trap in the room. They just know it. Out of game as a player, but then as a character they have no idea. So essentially, you as a GM are asking them to, walk in and maybe kill their character. Yeah. So I've run into situations where you get kind of where because you can't always see it coming, and they kind of get pigeonholed into this situation where you can either metagame and not step into the room, or you play your character and perhaps die. And that's where it gets difficult as a GM. And I found that because you don't want to just instant kill a character because something like that, but at the same time, you don't want to say, well, why do you stay out of the room? Sometimes I'll just, I might try to help in a situation like that. Like if it's a particularly devout religious character, then they might get a sign from their deity or something of that nature, or they might just get a feeling about the room, or something like that. Just if I know that we've come to one of those almost impossible cruxes where the player has not to either not metagame or kill themselves.
One of the things I tend to do myself as a GM I'm the same as John in the base. I've tried all sort of, we'll take these folk out this place, we'll put this folk there, but it got to the stage going, it's not worth it. I trust my players not to, not consciously metagame. The problem here I try to get around is the subconscious metagaming. I'm in this setting. This is coming up. I'm expecting X, Y, Z. I'm in Star Wars. I'm expecting to see stormtroopers, stuff like that. So,
Ewoks.
There's no surprise.
Everybody expects stormtroopers.
What I tend to do instead is I will actually try and subvert the expectations of the players. One occasion I was doing a Serenity game. It's a fantastic game. I got one player so scared that she actually did a full-throated scream at one point. I nearly jumped into my seat, but the player
I wondered what you were going to say then. I'm glad you said scream.
Well
done, sir. Well done.
Honestly, screamed. But what I was doing, I was playing Serenity. But instead, I decided to take the Serenity going, we've got powerful psychics. I'll make the brown coats caught this psychic, and we're trying to do the experimentation type things happening. And he's incredibly powerful. And the players arrive at this abandoned base, and there's zombies pretty much attacking them. What's actually happened is psychics telekinetically moving the corpses. The psychic is in batshit crazy, and believes these are zombies. So his mind is making these zombies move. The players were freaked out to hell, going, "There's zombies in Serenity! No zombies in Serenity!" It subverts their expectation.
What?
Stop doing that.
I want to play that.
It was all within the game as well. It was psychic.
Oh,
You brought up a good point though of GM metagaming, which I'm not sure how people feel about that because again by playing on player expectations, that's a form of metagaming as well. You're using out of character knowledge about a player. Like you might know a player has a particular fear of spiders, right? So maybe you set up a room that's just full of spiders that they have to get through, So is that a good form of gaming? I mean, I'll hold off on my opinion until I hear you guys say, but because it does bring up a lot of emotions. If someone sees this room full of spiders, and of course, if someone is arachnophobic, they're gonna be like, "Oh, that'd be horrifying to them to try to go through this room."
I think
so
it really
definitely immerses them.
I think it really depends on the game because the example I'd give was a Cthulhu LARP, which was very immersive. It was 24-hour timing, basically. Basically, they did give the warning beforehand that it may have some form of triggers, and there was quite a series of different games that they did throughout the year that we did it. One of which was the game where I'd never really just full out screamed my head off at a horror game before. I don't like horror games, but I went in for it anyway because it was quite fun to do. But the game afterwards, we had actually in a hostel in a Lake District, so it's quite remote, and they'd actually got a full-on Shoggoth costume. It was absolutely fantastic because Becca got to be part of a Shoggoth costume. She's grinning at this point because she remembers it. Very fond memories because she got eaten. She was basically my servant, but she was a real eatable cultist bitch. We nearly killed her in the game as well. But they had full-on warnings. To basically say, this may trigger fear warnings, and Sean Al actually played one of the evil cultists, and he was fucking evil because someone actually had a panic attack so bad they
it's in the job description, man.
Yeah, no, he fell down the stairs at one point, and then there were these really tiny little toilets. Someone had actually locked themselves in. And one of them wanted to scritched on the oh, it gets better, believe me. So he scritches on it. She goes goes away, and then Al comes back about maybe 5 minutes later. Scritch, scritch, scritch. she panics so much she actually stops hyperventilating and nearly passes out. So you know, that was for her a really big trigger factor. For me, it would have been the first computer game because I was literally hiding behind the bathroom door thinking, shit, he's going to notice me because I'm shaking so much that the door is trembling. So,
I love the way you went
so,
to,
you know,
I don't really like horror games. Cthulhu, that'll be a good start.
Oh God, I mean, for me, I don't think I've ever had a game so terrifying that's ever happened. But for it was part of the fun because it was so immersive that it was very exhilarating, and I don't think I've ever had that kind of experience. But you know, certainly if there were trigger factors such as phobias, you know, I think at very least warning people beforehand, you know, and I think that really helped a lot because at least it wasn't a safe environment where we were, where you know there were a lot of people there who were looking out for each other, and you know certainly when the person fell down the stairs, you know everyone stopped and said, you know, shit, this has actually happened, you know that everyone's just completely fallen to pieces. But yeah, I don't know what other experiences people have really had about that though.
Well, with any role playing game, you really need to talk to people ahead of time to find out, you know. Well, first of all, like you give it a rating. Like you know, I use kind of the movie rating system if I'm getting players. Say, okay, we're going to be doing an R-rated game, or we're going to do a PG, or you know, whatever it happens to be. But you never know what someone's trigger is going to be. Like, or you know, it could even be something as that you wouldn't even think of. Like my wife, the first time I got her into a role-playing game, that for her trigger is finances. She's really obsessive about finance. She panics about like not having enough money to pay the bills and all this.
I'm with her on that.
We can all relate to that in some way, yeah.
Well, she started off by playing a rogue, okay, and in this particular setting, to increase, you know, to get your training, you had to pay the guild a certain amount of gold to receive your training. You know that you did, you know. So when I told her that the fee for training was like 500 gold pieces, she started to panic. She's like, I don't have 500 gold. Where am I going to get 500 gold pieces? And she actually started to panic in real life. And I'm like, honey, it's okay. Relax. It's a game. It's gonna be okay. First of all, you're a thief. You can get the money. You can steal it. It's
yeah, but depending on how long it takes, they might be adding interest to it.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah. I'm gonna bring up compound interest with it. That would settle that.
I mean, going back to Alex's initial question of is GM metagaming a good thing? I'd say it is a good thing. One of the things Em was saying, in fact, that setting was great. You got all the fear feelings going through you and everything else. The players, if they know this, what we're saying about subverting expectations, if the players are going into a situation, their fantasy heroes are going to fight a dragon. The characters should be wetting themselves. The players are normally quite casual about the whole thing. Oh right, we got this, we got that. The next thing. My players in the Serenity game, when they suddenly figured out zombies were attacking them, properly freaked out. This is what their characters would have freaked out. They freaked out. It allows the GM to give you an immersive, emotional experience that would be hard to get if everything's going exactly as expected and nothing's unusual. The players quite often get jaded in their feelings, and the GM being aware and metagaming a little bit can break that jading and make it a bit fresher again.
I think it's always going to be a problem with role-playing. I mean, no matter how good you are at role-playing, and I like to think if I'm in a horror game, I can role-play a character who's like scared or angry or whatever. But at the end of the day, there's always a certain amount of me that knows I'm sat here in a chair in like a Google Hangout, or I'm sat around a comfy table with the lights on and rolling dice with my friends, or I'm sat in a field drinking a ridiculous amount of alcohol with my friends. Whatever I happen to be doing, there's always a certain part of you that knows, and also you can do things to sort of enhance that experience. Obviously, you can have the lights dimmed or whatever if it's a sort of horror game. Always in the back of their mind, people are always going to sort of know that they're not really being chased by like a mad killer, or they're not really going to fight against. I think the only thing you can do with that is you can sort of, again, it comes down to the sort of the quality of the player. I think if you can't, I'm not really a fan of like getting at people like actually sort of scared or worried or sort of panicked personally myself, because don't get me wrong, I go to role play because I enjoy the role playing, but I wouldn't go to role play because I enjoyed having a panic attack brought on, or...
Well, yeah, I'd agree with you entirely. I mean, when I was saying players are freaking out, I don't mean they were actually running around trying to find a way out of the flat. But there's this freeze-on of emotional echo that was sort of, it helps enhance the whole experience, and that's what I feel what a GM metagame can do. It can enhance the experience. It just brings that wee bit of extra, not full-blown panic. I'm not trying to make anybody wet myself. Girl let out the full-throated scream. It was a very intense scene, and then something happened, and she had her eyes shut at this point in time, wasn't expecting it, and just screamed. It was not my intention. It was a great moment, though. I'm still proud of it. But it was.
Don't get me wrong. I think you're absolutely right. If you can get a sort of an echo of that emotion into someone, then it's a great thing. I mean, when Jenny told me she got genuinely sort of like emotional in like a game session I ran recently with like one of her characters' friends, I'll admit I did a bit of a happy dance away from the computer when I finished the session. I'm not going to lie, but
It was awesome.
as you say, it's more going to be, again, it's that sort of within limits sort of idea, isn't it? What you have to sort of keep it within a reasonably sort of tolerable limits.
Yeah, but I think it's good.
I think Drew wants to pipe in about something. He was just messaging there. He wants to pipe in about GM and metagaming and stuff. So, what did you want to say?
No, I was just sitting there and I was listening, and then I keep chasing up into this. I was like, "What are we talking about? Have I missed my chance?"
No.
But no, I was going to say, like, I do think. I mean, I'm not one for metagaming for players to metagame, because, as I say, I think a lot of the good experience you can get is from when someone might not know something that someone else does. Much like I was saying, like Emma got some information in a game that we played. She didn't share it with the group, and I think if she had shared it with the group, the game would have gone very differently. And that only could happen because I told her separately from the group by writing a note. But then, as you say, like, I do think GM metagaming can be a good thing if used correctly. I played a game called I GM'd a game called All Flesh Must Be Eaten. And it's a zombie system.
Oh dear.
I'm sorry, everyone. But no. But what I did is I set up the adventure. I wrote the entire adventure. The entire adventure was we sit down for a night of gaming. We're going to play this role-playing game, and a zombie comes through the window and eats me. And that's how the game began. In the situation we were in, and I got removed from the game immediately because I was GMing everything. And that kind of worked out really well, because everyone basically, I just went, right, you've got whatever you've got on you right now. So they were like, right, oh, I've got a pencil. Great, what can I do with a pencil? I can stab the zombie in the eye. It was kind of, it kind of worked out because I just, I turned the game on itself, quite literally. So, like, I do think there is some points where it can be good, but I do think there are some points where by giving the players the choice of revealing the information or not revealing certain information in the game, you get a much better experience, I would say. And, like, of course, a player is going to react to stuff they know. Like, I know I would react if I knew, like, if I failed this thing, I might die. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go, like, right, can I go another way? Can I do this? Can I do that? And the only thing that can really make me do it then is if I'm forced to.
I think with the situation you gave about the choice of information, I think, to be fair, we'd really been kind of put together as a party not very long before you gave me that information. So I had no idea of who to really trust in that group, specifically with Edge of Empire, because it's basically the scum of the galaxy. We don't really have any force powers, and you were very strict on enforcing the rules of, there shouldn't be many Jedi amongst us for a good reason. So, the player choice is very clear and obvious to me, certainly, if not to you as a GM. If I've got that information, I'll reveal it when I think that actually I can trust these people, because certainly my character background, I was on the run and had a deadly enemy. I think that was what my character had. I had some serious flaw, didn't I? yeah, because I'd killed my superior officer in the Empire after me, because, you know, you don't piss off the Empire. So, you know, giving me the information I had, based on the fact that I was a former officer, you know, I didn't know who the people in my party really were. You know, I didn't know who actually to trust. One of them was a fucking droid, for God's sake. So, you know, and we don't think kindly on droids in the Empire. So, so yeah, I think certainly having that option there and being able to make the choice based actually what my character would do in a situation, because, you know, I've known them for about a week. We've been hired to do some form of mission, which is basically a rerun of Firefly, I should say, again.
Star Wars Firefly.
Oh, absolutely! I really loved the game. I mean, Sean said he was going to get me the copies of the books somehow, and I'm going to be running the game because I really like the system, and I think it gave me a good opportunity to be more creative than I have in a while. Because certainly for me as a GM, my creative kind of enthusiasm has been very low for a long time, because I was so kind of disheartened, shall we say, by combination of, you know, rules lawyers. I did have a couple of metagamers in the game that I played, mainly because I had a player who played a very special character. He was very special Snowflake. He had a Humanity Zero alter ego arrangement, but somehow didn't have. He somehow retained his identity, as it were, even though he was Zero, and then somehow was able to trigger things without it affecting him at all. And I guess in a way it was more power gamey than metagamey. And, you know, I don't really criticise the player, because actually he's a nice guy, but I got pissed off to the fact that I kind of engineered things to. Well, I kind of brought in Belial's brood in the form of his sire and stripped all of his humanity away to destroy him, and he went and left. So I kind of got revenge in a very bad way, and I probably shouldn't have done it in the way that I did. But yeah, so certainly Edge of Empire, I think if I get to run that would be absolutely amazing. But
I've got an extra player peeve if we can chuck something still.
Yeah.
Games where you've just reminded me by talking about the zombie game. Games where you have to play yourself.
You don't like those?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Because I'll let you in on a little secret. Do you know what I spend the majority of my life doing?
Playing yourself.
Being myself. Yeah.
Really?
And to be fair, if
wow,
if
that's a coincidence.
That's it.
I spend most of my life playing you.
You play me as well, yeah.
Yeah, I do.
To be fair, you do look a bit like me, just with better hair. but the whole thing is if real life was like as magical and as like amazing and horrifying as a role-playing game, then we wouldn't need to play role-playing games, would we? So why would I want to play a role-playing game where the first thing they say is, "Oh, you've got all this." One of the things I love about role-playing games is you can play all these different characters and different types of creatures, and then suddenly someone goes, "Oh yeah, but you're playing yourself," and I'm like, "Oh yeah," because if I'm going to play like a character in a role-play game, what I'd choose would be like a 34-year-old slightly overweight accountant. That's what I'd go for. That's the top of my list of things I want to do.
Yes, I had the experience of one of those games recently. It was a zombie one, and the GM said, "Right, you're playing yourself. Roll a dice. On odds, you're at your workplace. On evens, you're at home." And I got odds. I ended up at my workplace. At the time, I was at Amazon, and we stocked legit power tools, which were all battery operated, coming with half battery power, bows, arrows, the lot. And I was just like, "You've just ended the game, haven't you?" Yep.
Like I said, I think it's a bit like it kind of depends on the game and stuff like that. I mean, I wouldn't want to play like Dungeons and Dragons as myself. That would be crap. But it's like a one-off. You know, I'll play a one-off game of All Flesh Must Be Eaten as myself, because I'll be like, right, what would I do in this? You know, who hasn't thought about being in an interesting situation like that? Who hasn't thought like, oh, if I've got a zombie plan, and you can kind of role play that out, and that could be the part. Or there was we did another one where we played slightly exaggerated versions of ourselves. So I went, well, this is one where I've gone to the gym for 6 months and I'm able to run more than 30 metres without collapsing in heart pains. You know, stuff like, you know.
Don't get me wrong, I can sort of see the point for a zombie game, because in a zombie game, you are supposed to be playing like a normal person. So I do sort of see the point in a zombie game.
But no,
it's just, even if I was going to play like a zombie game, though, I'd rather play like any other person where I've got a bit more sort of creative freedom about it than
but, like,
myself.
For instance, I might turn around and go like, right, you are you, but this is you in 6 months' time. What are you going to be in 6 months' time? You can say whatever you like.
Yeah, but
So
if it's realistic, in about 6 months' time, I'm probably going to be slightly heavier, about 6 months older. I'll have maybe shifted a bit of this weight from all these Christmas dinners I've eaten, if I'm lucky.
You need to do pitch loss, John.
Oh, we heard about it. It was me who started interviewing Hogan.
Yeah, but you could turn around and say, well, I won the lottery, and in all my spare time, I bought a lot of weapons, and I mastered them all, and now I'm an expert in everything.
My thing is, if I'm...
Yeah, no, I get what you mean.
If it's so divorced from who I actually am, though, why not just say it's not me? Yeah, what's the point of it being me in the first place? I may as well just say, right, I'm playing a millionaire who's won the lottery and blah 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 and all the extra details, rather than trying to shoehorn myself into it.
I would say though, I mean, certainly don't agree. I don't like the idea of actually playing myself at all to the letter, certainly in an RPG, but certainly every character that I've had, even the ones that are really morally ambiguous to the point where, as a vampire, I've just randomly diablerized someone just for the lols. You know, there's always been some form of aspect. You know, I've always had a moral aspect. Certainly in the first character I played. Certainly in the one I'm playing now in LARP. So you know, I certainly like to kind of push in some form of aspect of my personality there. I don't know if I'd be comfortable having just nothing that was actually relatable, really. But that's just because I don't know how to play Red Cap, really, John.
It's easy.
So
you just eat a lot.
All right, okay. Eat a lot and drink a lot. Okay.
We're not fussed about the drinking.
Does anyone else have any other peeves they want to share before we move on to questions? Because I know some people have to be gone by 10.
Well, let's do questions.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll just bring them up.
Bring on the questions.
Right, okay, so Emma, who Drew knows, this is a completely random one, I should say. It says, what's your most memorable dice rolling failure? Which doesn't relate really to peeves, but, you know, in terms of, oh my god.
Okay, yeah.
That
one's easy for me.
So thinking about Scion, because I've got that in my head at the moment now that I've talked about it a bit. But I was playing that game where I was the son of Loki and I could walk up to people and tell them the line, you had to pass the test to do this. And I think I was trying to convince someone that they already told me their passcode for something. I can't remember what we were trying to do exactly, but I remember I had to get some information out of him. So I was trying to convince him that I already had it, and I rolled the dice. And pretty much the roll was like, 50-50, and I managed to roll completely in the wrong direction, and he was and like the whole plan we had for the game had been ruined, and we had to like re-strategize everything that we were trying to do because the character noticed that I was lying to him and then wouldn't trust me because I rolled so badly. So that was one that I remember because we added on about half an hour to the game while we tried to figure out what we were going to do now to get the information. Not an interesting one, but that's what I've got.
I had one occasion a dice rolling failure as a player when I was playing Deadlands. I was playing a huckster as a spellcaster. Now the way the system works is you've dealt so many cards, depending on how successful you were, and you make the best poker hand you can out of it. And depending on the hand you get, it will determine the damage. We were fighting the big end guy, big end boss, and I'd snuck behind him. I was ready to pull out and just distract the right moment. Drew my cards and I pulled this one set, the Dead Man's Hand. This is the specific hand. It just basically means you get hit with this, you're dead. There's no comeback. You're dead. What the GM, when I threw this down with a triumphant ha, and GM goes, he's got a spell shield up. I've been telling you this. It bounces back. And it was, so we did. We were supposed to wait till that went down before I did this, wasn't I? Dead man's hand. It was just, oh, you'd dream of this result normally, and it just totally backfired because I'd forgot part of the plan.
Oh dear.
A dice rolling failure, but still a skill check failure.
I would say certainly. I've actually had really good luck with dice. I've rarely had any real criticals at all. I remember one. I think Drew was actually playing the game where we played the playtest of the new D&D system, and it was the Hobbit rogue, wasn't it? The dodgy Hobbit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was an archer, and I completely flopped the roll.
Oh,
and,
I
think I shot someone or something. Yeah. But I've not had many. I mean, the latest game I'm playing at the minute, I went and we were attacking a base that we didn't think was as technologically advanced as before, and then they had laser weapons, and I completely failed a defense check and somehow survived, despite the fact that they had also a percentile dice for extra stuff when you got a 1, and managed to kind of lower myself back onto the top ship and had hold myself, which lasted for 2 weeks, I think. So I was very, very badly injured. But I've actually been remarkably lucky. There's very few times actually that I've got ones at all to the point where I've just out and out. Well, I've never died anyway from a critical failure, so that's all good.
I was going to say, wasn't in that D&D game where we were trying to sneak into the base, the shop?
Oh no! I was supposed to be sneaky Hobbit, and I completely failed the skill check, and I went into the bins. Yeah. I actually fell into the bin, despite the fact that I was short in the bin. So that was interesting. Yeah.
I do have another one actually, which is relating to D&D, which is my dad always used to tell us a story when he used to play D&D. That they had a guy who was playing a thief, and he ended up being the world's worst thief. And it's just like he kept failing all of these rolls. And I think his worst one, of my favourite one, was like my dad had a singing sword, and he hadn't told anyone in the group this. That he had this special sword, and the thief was like, "Oh, I quite like that sword. I'm going to go and try and steal it from him." And so in the middle of the night, he wakes up, he goes to try and steal it, he fails the check, and he gets stabbed. And all of the last thing he hears is like, "You are fucked," sung to him. As this singing sword stabbed him, because it was a singing sword, and it always sang whatever it was saying. So that's how his character got killed off in the end, because he couldn't make the right rolls to save his character.
I had one that it wasn't so much based on a roll, but on a plan. This was way back. We were playing the Q1 in the old D&D, which was Queen of the Demon Web Pits, and we went to the Abyss to kill off Lolth. So I had this plan. I had a bag of holding and a portable hole. So I was going to throw the portable hole into the bag of holding, tie it off, throw it at Lolth, and just destroy it completely. And so I should have known too, because when we first got there, we encountered her. So we're fighting her minions. I tie it off, I throw it, and she turned out to be just an illusion. So I wasted the whole thing just on that, and then she attacked us from behind, and we pretty much got brutally massacred. So not so much roll, but just really, I fell for the oldest trick in the book. Well, this was like 20 years ago, so it wasn't old then, but it's old now.
I can't actually think of any sort of bad dice rolls I've had, to be honest. I don't really get to play enough to actually have any sort of bad dice rolls. I mean, I suppose there was the point in Jenny's game where I nearly got stuck through a portal to the underworld, but that was
cool.
that was a bit of a brown trousers moment for a few minutes. But
Not even the underworld, the netherworld. So even worse. Give or take. Depending on what kind of person you are.
The nether region.
I was going to say that's what I was more concerned about at the time, my nether region.
I've had too many bad dice rolls to count. I mean, the worst one was falling off a mountaintop when trying to perform an attack. Exalted, many dice happened. I failed that badly on the rolls that instead of firing the energy attack at the bad guy along with the butterflies, I got flung off a mountain by my own butterfly attack.
Oh, was it that obsidian butterflies thing?
Yes, I fired the obsidian butterflies at the bad guy, rolled that many critical fails that the energy blast back fired me off the mountain, which was at a blizzard at the time.
I love the thoughts of like your character being like, guys, I've got this, and then just like this, boom, from behind, and then look at this little dot flying into the distance.
Crazy.
Yep, pretty much.
Is that everyone's fail story? I don't know if anyone else has not shared
Yeah, I've got one.
John then.
Well, John's already heard this, so he's not worry, but
I'm still gonna laugh though.
It involved my only character death and also probably one of the worst character deaths you could possibly have. It was very, very unjust. But what happened was we were going into a dungeon. I was a halfling rogue. One of my first characters.
Dodgy hobbit.
Yeah. The dodgy hobbit. Or in this case, more an antisocial hobbit. But there was this NPC half-orc with us as well, who was kind of leading the way. And then we got to this big chasm, and of course, being a halfling, I couldn't jump across. There was no way. Although one of the other guys managed to get over, but I couldn't. So the orc offered to toss me. You can see where this is going, right?
No.
So firstly was the DM doing a really bad roll because he was orc, and of course it didn't succeed. So I managed to fall into this pit. But then my bad roll came when the DM said, okay, like 6 skeletons appear in this pit. And I'm a rogue, so I'm obviously wetting myself at this point. Because, you know, rogues and undead don't really go. So I did a really bad critical failure, and in like 2 moves, I was dead.
And that's why half-orcs tossing off hobbits is a bad idea.
Yes.
Okay, so right. Apparently, this one is right. Okay, so Martin says, "What's the best way to deal with a player who designs their characters based on what annoys other players?"
I think I said this one earlier when I said, at the beginning of the game, a meteorite falls from the sky.
Kill them then.
Kills the
What
straight away.
I find dramatically pointing at the door like the ghost of Christmas Future.
There's always the popular way. The GM is pissed off. You're all bunnies in a magical world, and you're being hunted by one guy with a shotgun.
No, because that pissed me off.
I mean, there's a difference between a player that deliberately creates a character that's going to piss off half your group and a player that accidentally does it.
Yeah.
If it's done accidentally, you should catch this in character creation. Because it should be flagged up and going, this is going to be an issue. If it's done deliberately, realistically, if somebody's going to be that much of an arsehole at that point, they're going to be an arsehole again at a later point, so kick them.
Yeah, that's just intolerable. That's just intolerable. You just, show them the door, basically.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways to catch it, as you guys rightly say, is a GM should be like approving any characters before they come into the game anyway. So, if you know the rest of your players and you look at this character, you go, well, that's blatantly going to annoy like everyone else around the table. So the first step's to have a word with the person and establish whether it's deliberately attempting to sort of like provoke them for some reason, or whether it's just maybe the other person doesn't know your other players as much and isn't aware of it. In which case, you either got the option of going, probably nazzing off like every other player in the group's possibly not a good idea. If they continue, the door's there. You might want to use it. If it is accidental, then you can work with them to come up with something that's maybe going to be similar, but not annoy everybody else.
Mm.
And there's potential somebody might decide,
definitely.
I want to have a character, but a bit of drama added in, so I'll have a bit of a conflict with one character, but agree with the other character first. Make sure everyone's okay out of character beforehand. Because it is good. Somebody overdoes it and annoys everybody. Yeah, John's right. Done.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if all of those reasonable suggestions don't work, meteorite.
Yeah. Okay.
It's always good for acquisition.
Right. Right. Becca said she wanted me to give her questions up. To be fair, I think we've covered some of them. Really, she says, is a power gamer more annoying in LARP or in tabletop? Is there anything in particular that is more annoying in either version than a power gamer? And also, can you ever not resolve one of the pet peeves? Is there something that's just not resolvable at all?
I think there's a point, in terms of not being resolvable, I think there's a point where, as you've all just been saying there, you have to sort of say to a person, maybe this game and this group aren't compatible with your style of play, and you maybe have to go your separate ways. But that's not to say that person will never find a group or a GM that will suit their particular style.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is finding the right style. I mean, you could have an entire group of power gamers, and if they're all okay with that and they're having fun, go for it, you know. But
Yeah, teenage boys.
but if you have one group of, you know, if you have like two, you know, one or two people who are power gamers and another 2 or 3 people who are, you know, into, you know, immersive role playing, you know, it's just not going to be compatible. You know, it doesn't mean one is better or worse. It's just.
I mean, it's like you have the people who are like heavily.
They're not going to have fun.
The people who are into like the sort of heavily tactical, sort of combat-based systems. Yeah. Now that's not my particular vibe, but it doesn't mean it's really a bad way of playing. It's just not my particular sort of preference. But if there's a group out there, get as tactical as they want, as long as they're all enjoying themselves, they're not doing me any harm. So go for it.
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, last question before we wrap. It's actually more of a feedback thing. So Alex has been watching through most of this, poor guy. It's mainly kind of comments on the idea of the red cap character, where we were talking about like the concept of newbies, you know, why would you actually go out and out to help someone even though your character really wouldn't do it. So he says, a comment on the discussion around the red cap character and such. One good general piece of advice he's seen is that even if your character would actually do something stupid or fun ruining, it's usually a good idea to allow yourself out in the form of allowing yourself to be talked out of something or find a new way to react, e.g. toy with the annoying bugger, and this is rather mine, instead of killing him straight off. Would that count as a good kind of piece of advice, do you think?
Works for me. I think whatever you've got to do to justify basically not being a prize prick works well for me.
Well, that kind of goes back to the kind of good metagaming I mentioned before, which is you know, you presumably want to play with the people you're with, so. You know, you need to figure out a way for them to get along together. Like I was playing a chaotic good character in a game where the other player was lawful evil. You know, presumably naturally opposed in D&D, and yet because we wanted to play together as players, we figured out a way for our characters to want to be together. Right. So. If we want to be dicks about it, we could just say, you know, we could be constantly at odds and you know, in a different direction. But because we want to play together, we both contrived ways, kind of collectively, to figure out a way for us to want to work together. So, you know, I think in the case, it works. I think it can work if the player is willing to, you know, if they wanted to. That makes sense.
Cool. So, is there anything else people want to add before we decide to wrap this thing and then just get drunk? Although some of you already are.
Get?
I like some of you already are. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John's
The
not
British have
employed,
no sympathy for each other.
I don't think I told you.
To be fair, this amount of booze sort of like is quite pale compared to the amount I drink at LARP, so
Yeah.
it's like a pleasant evening typical for me. So.
One word, mangria.
It's all about the mangria.
Yeah, mangria. Oh dear.
Just lost Jenny.
This is just generating now into chaos, isn't it?
But John, it does give us a pale image of for those of us who haven't seen you at LARP, you know, what it's like, you know, a kind of, you know, a vague image of what you might be like at LARP.
Well, yeah, I'm basically like I am now, only I've probably drunk a lot more. I'm dressed in a slightly more outlandish fashion, possibly with face paint, and I have dreadlocks.
Oh.
And I'm a bit more prone to like killing people and eating them.
No.
Om nom nom.
Who is it?
Cool.
Who is
Well,
it?
Sleep well, kids.
oh dear. Oh no. Well, I think that kind of wraps things up today. So thank you everyone for participating. It's been good to actually meet some of you in person rather than in text. And I imagine next one will be just as fun to do. Actually, yeah. So
Thank you for running it.
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And thanks everyone for watching, or whoever you are.
Anyone that's watching this, thank you so much for your patience.
And listen to us.
Thank you, or sorry.
Yes. Bye everybody.
Bye.